Good morning. Welcome to our May 11th Board of County Commission meeting. And this morning we'd like to start our meeting with an invocation by Pastor James Brokus from Stewart Alliance Church, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led today by Michael Northcott from Air Force. He was an Air Force veteran and a Veteran Services Officer. Please stand.
Good morning.
Morning.
I had announced at the MPO meeting anyway, but I am stepping down at our church, and this gentleman here, Pastor Jim Harp, will be the new senior pastor.
That's why I was just wondering if this was like the farewell tour. Like,
I'll be hanging around the area and be involved in the church, but I'll be there. So it's been a real privilege to pray with you men and the women over the years.
We will miss you.
Thank you.
Motion to deny his retirement.
Father in heaven, again, thank you for your great, great love for us. Thank you. You just allow us to live in this wonderful place here. Thank you for these men and women and their desire to help and to bring encouragement and strength and hope to our area. I pray, Lord, that you would continue to give wisdom and direction and understanding. I pray, Father, for good health. I pray for strength. I pray, again, just for insight into what needs to be done. And again, thank you for the leadership they provided through this pandemic, and we pray that you would continue to direct and guide them day by day. So again, thank you for your blessing here, and we just pray that you would continue to bless this area. We pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have our veteran, huh? Okay. I see a very special guest in the audience that I would like to welcome this morning, our Sheriff, William Snyder. Welcome. We will be hearing a presentation from Sheriff Snyder in just a moment. And with that, we have on today's agenda, we have one additional item, consent item 8. No consent polls. And back to the board for...
Madam Chair, move approval of the agenda and the consent items with the additional item of consent number 8. Second.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Smith, seconded by Commissioner Jenkins. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And today we have 4 separate proclamations, and our first one will be Hurricane Preparedness Week.
Good morning, Commissioners. The Martin County Board of County Commissioners is dedicated to mitigating the effects of hurricanes and tropical storms by informing the public of preparedness actions. Therefore, during Hurricane Preparedness Week, which is May 9th through the 15th, the board encourages the cooperation of municipalities, businesses, homeowners associations, and the media in efforts to inform residents and visitors of awareness, preparedness, and safety measures related to hurricane season. And here to accept, we have Sally Waite, Martin County Emergency Management Director.
Good morning, Commissioners, and
Good morning.
thank you for this opportunity to discuss Hurricane Preparedness Week. Before I start that, I'd like to introduce Sanji Hawkins, is a newly promoted Deputy Director of Emergency Management. And Susanna Garces has actually taken a new responsibility from Fire Rescue Admin or Administration into the Emergency Management Technician role, so we're excited about that as well. We just wanted to say that the time to prepare is now, and make a plan, build a kit, stay informed. Usually the standard stuff that we tell everyone. We did update our road to readiness, and you can find that at your local libraries or go to martin.fl.us/EM. Please remember that hurricanes are not just a coastal problem. It only takes one to change a life and a community. So please be prepared, be a survivor, hurricane survivor, not a victim. And disaster preparedness, sales tax holiday, don't want you to forget that, is May 28th through June 4th. So there's many things that are available to prepare yourself that don't include sales tax. So that's good for us. And just remember to know your risk and make sure you know if you're in an evacuation zone or storm zone. And you can also find that on the Guide to Readiness as well. We've loaded up the library, so there should be easy access to these brochures. And thank you very much.
Now you're in the picture looking like a crazy girl.
Okay, our next proclamation this morning is Mental Health Awareness Month.
44 million American adults are living with a mental health illness, and 13% of American youth aged 12 to 17 are living with major depression. The purpose of Mental Health Awareness Month is to increase public understanding of the importance of mental health and recognize the need for Martin County to be a community that supports mental wellness. And here to accept, we have William Wims, who's the Chief Executive Officer at New Horizons.
Good morning, all.
Good morning.
Commissioners, I want to thank you for recognizing mental health because we know each and every one of us have in some way had to deal with it. I enjoy working with the county. I enjoy working with the local, the sheriff's office and the school board because we realize this reaches us each and every day, everywhere where we exist. It's an excellent opportunity for people to understand what's going on. I thank you for having your green on because this is Get Your Green On Month to celebrate mental health awareness. Thank you for giving me this opportunity and us. We will continue to serve the Martin County community and just a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
You should have brought your baby today. You should have brought your baby.
She goes everywhere.
Okay, our next proclamation this morning will be Apraxia Awareness Day.
Childhood apraxia of speech causes children to have significant difficulty learning to speak and is among the most severe speech deficits in children. And while the act of learning to speak comes effortlessly to most children, those with apraxia endure a lengthy struggle. May 14th is recognized as Childhood Apraxia of Speech Day, and the board encourages all residents to learn more about this challenging speech disorder. And here to accept, we have Jackie Dillon, who is a parent and advocate,
And with her team.
and some really special helpers.
Good morning. Thank you for
Morning.
having us. As you heard, childhood apraxia of speech is a very rare and misunderstood neurological speech disorder. And as a Martin County teacher and an advocate for Apraxia Kids, which is a 501c3, I am very dedicated to raising awareness. So on behalf of my son Joseph and all of the kids who struggle with this disorder, we thank you for issuing this proclamation for this special day.
And who else is with you?
This is Joseph and this is Margaret.
Oh, hi, Margaret. So she has a mini mask on.
Right?
Chunky legs. I get to notice these things these days.
Margaret wants to hold too. Okay, and our final proclamation this morning is the 30th anniversary of the Salvation Army.
The Salvation Army is celebrating 30 years of serving Martin County residents in their time of need. In recognition of this auspicious occasion, the board urges residents to support the Salvation Army through their time, talent, or resources on behalf of all residents who have relied upon their services. And here to accept, we have Captain Jeff Marquis.
Well, good morning. And
Morning.
on behalf of those who I followed, thank you so much for this proclamation. The true measure of a community is the way they care for those on the margins. And I'm so grateful that the Salvation Army is able to play a part in that as we work with families and individuals to break the cycle of generational poverty. I do want to make a little bit of a plug that this Friday at 6 o'clock at the Riverwalk stage, we're going to be celebrating our 30th anniversary outside in a safe way with a concert of brass band music. The Salvation Army is the largest publisher of brass band music in the United States, and so we're going to be celebrating that. So come on out from 6 to 7. It's free, and then you can walk through downtown and maybe get some ice cream afterwards. But thank you guys so much for this opportunity.
You're two lunatics. Well, each time you had a different technique. Dodging, crawling around on the ground.
Okay. That completes our proclamations this morning, and we are going to move on to public comment. If you would like to make a public comment, please fill out one of these and give to the bailiff. I have 3 at the moment, and we will start with Miss Amy Pritchett, followed by Mike Connor.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Rocky Point continues to be a traffic problem. In addition to speeds over 50 miles an hour, we were treated 2 drag racers the other night, side by side, racing up Horseshoe Point Road. I've been given information that the budget now contains 3 times the amount of traffic calming remediation dollars, and I'm asking that my district representative meet with us and discuss what we can do to remediate the traffic in Horseshoe Point. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Our next public speaker is Mike Connor, and Mike will be followed by Gary Fisher.
Good morning, Commissioners, staff. Thanks for the opportunity to speak as always. Until about 2 days ago, my intention was to come here and talk about compliance on the Jensen Beach relief bridges. I'm going to reserve those comments for the next meeting. Something of greater urgency is on the plate right now. I want to speak to you about Lake Okeechobee, C-44 Canal. Last night I had the pleasure of presenting to the City Commission an update on Lake O and an update on the situation of the C-44 Canal, which now has highly toxic cyanobacteria. Also, Ben Hogarth gave a LOSUM update. We talked about the possibilities, what we have coming down the line. About 4 days ago on Saturday, Waterkeepers Florida, 17 chapters, Friends of the Everglades, Center for Biological Diversity, drafted and sent a letter to Governor DeSantis requesting that he executes an emergency order immediately. And that order will do a lot of very good things for us sooner than later. Waiting for LOSUM to come together. It's a year and a half away before we have a real plan. We're not so sure the final LOSUM plan, iteration they use, is going to be totally beneficial to our estuary and our human health, which is right now in the crosshairs. The declaration will do one great thing for us. It'll take Send Water South off the bumper stickers and make it reality right now. If the governor calls an emergency order, that will force the South Florida Water Management District and Army Corps and engineers collaboratively to find every bit of capacity south of Lake O to put the water immediately, not later. And at this point in the dry season, the Everglades is drying. It's receding just like Lake Okeechobee. There's a lot more capacity down there now than there was, 6-8 months ago. I watched the governor's press conference yesterday and say, Commissioner Hurd, I appreciate you being there representing us at the press conference. And others, I'm sorry. I saw the picture. I was looking for all of you. And thanks for being in there. Thank you, Commissioner. I came away with the thought that the governor, I'm glad that he is supporting LOSUM, supporting the cause for the estuaries. I was a little disappointed that he didn't make comment about the letter served to him at that time. I'm kind of disappointed the media didn't ask about the letter because it is being circulated. The media has it now.
So basically, the city last night after our presentation, they deliberated right away, and they made a motion. Commissioner Merritt Matheson made a motion to draft a letter in support of Waterkeepers Florida, Friends of Everglades letter, asking for an emergency order by the governor. So I come here today asking you the same favor. I come here today asking if you, the county commission, would do us this favor and do our community a great service by supporting our letter or drafting your own original letter to the governor. I believe there is a chance right now to send enough water south from Lake O to possibly
Sir, your time's up.
eliminate the discharges. It is a crucial
Time's up.
point right now. I appreciate it. Any consideration? Commissioner Heatherington,
you.
the letter is on your desk. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Mike. Our next public speaker is Gary Fisher. And that's the final public comment card I have of this morning, so if you'd like to make a public comment, now's the time.
Morning.
Morning.
I am here to discuss a notice that I got where I'm required to build enclosures around the dumpsters at my commercial center on warehouse complex. I would like some relief from that, and for two reasons. Here's why. Common sense tells me that this requirement is to hide dumpsters from public view. Pretty simple. As it turns out, most of my dumpsters already are not in private view. This is a warehouse complex, an industrial property. The dumpsters are behind warehouse buildings. There's no way the public can see these. The only people seeing them are the businesses that are using them. I do have a couple you could see if you took your eye off the road and looked down a driveway. There are some, and they're there for the convenience of the businesses, but I could easily relocate them to an area that you cannot see from the public driveway, which is Dixie Highway. Seems counterproductive to try to hide something that's already hidden. I don't understand the logic in that. That's one reason. Number two is the cost. I observed one of these enclosures, which they sent me the plans on and the specs. I mean, it's pretty complicated, what all's required. There's one being built over at a gas station on Indian River Drive. So I contacted the contractor to find out, what do these things cost? He said, well, the site it's on will have some bearing on it, but at the end of the day, you're looking at about $20,000. I have 8 dumpsters that I provide on my warehouse complex. If you multiply 20,000 times 8, that's $160,000. That's over twice what I pay in real estate tax on that property. I also have some tenants, small businesses, that have their own dumpster because they have, they generate more trash than what a normal business would operate, and so they have their own. I know they don't have $20,000 to build one of these. I'm not going to build it for them. They could be gone next year. Also, some of them are seasonal. They only need them on a particular job that they've got or whatever, so they're not there all the time. So what I would ask is that the wording could be such that dumpsters on industrial and commercial property that are not visible to public be exempt from these requirements. One, because they're unnecessary, and two, because they're unaffordable. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Ms. Krista, can you have a staff member get with Mr. Fisher and find out the details of his proper, Commissioner Smith, yes.
Gary, before you go, who was the letter from? Was it from utilities or from who? The CRA?
I have it right here. The letter's from Jordan
Okay.
CRA.
Astrios.
All right.
Want to see it?
No, I was just curious which department it came from. Thank you. That way we can follow. That way we can follow up.
We'll have a staff member meet you out front here so we can get the details of the property. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Flanagan.
Good morning.
Good morning.
For the record, I hadn't planned on speaking, but Mike Connor ran out of his 3 minutes, so I just want to kind of put a tail on the end of it. I know all 5 of the commissioners are very, very involved in our environmental issues, and whatever you can do to support whatever they're trying to make, rewind in your mind about 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. I still remember that picture of the manatee coming up in the pocket and the guy feeding the fresh water. I was at the City of Stuart last night, and I saw the presentation, and it's already there. It's, if you go out to Port Mayaca, there's always about the size of this little area right here that's full of the sludge plus the dried sludge on top. and it's coming, and we really need to do it. I know that the governor has limited our number of state of emergencies that we can declare, but whatever we can do to put that in place. And also, sidebar to the Jensen Beach Bridge, I walk it a lot, and I think it's really happening. So we're making sure it's clean. I know Mike and the Indian River Keepers and a handful of other people are doing a lot of work to make sure that we are allowed to keep that open for fishing. It's a great fishing spot. So thank you guys for that.
Thank
And
you.
I'll fill out a form now.
Okay. All right. That completes our public comment, and we're going to move to commissioner comment. We'll start in the. Commissioner Hurd, would you like to start today?
Yes, first of all, Ms. Pritchett, I believe we have a meeting scheduled for this Thursday. And also, Commissioner Hetherington, would you get that letter that Mike is talking about before the end of the day so that we can consider whether or not we would like to send a letter of support?
Yes. Is this the letter you were referring to that the bailiff laid on the counter? Okay. We'll get Miss Kristen to make copies.
That's all I have.
Okay. Commissioner Campy.
Thank you very much. Two quick things, Madam Chair. First, at our most recent MPO meeting, Ms. Beltran had mentioned to us that there's been something that the county has been collaborating with through FDOT District 4 and FDOT District 1, which includes Okeechobee. Many people in western Martin County will be familiar that as you drive the Martin grade heading out of the county, heading west towards Okeechobee on County Road 714, when you get to the end, it does a weird kind of jog around before it reaches 710. And it's been something that's been on the drawing board of being realigned for many, many years. The reason it's been so complicated a process is it crosses over two different FDOT districts and two different counties. But we have been very pleased and thankful for the cooperation between the districts and between the counties, and we're at the point now where we can take care of this. The other safety issue is, and anyone that's driven from Okeechobee back to Martin County, when you're traveling on State Road 710 south, if you're not really paying attention, especially in the evening, it's very difficult to realize where you would make, where you would make that left. And so through the diligent work of our staff, we are now at a position to realign that intersection at County Road 714 and State Road 710. The commissioners and the staff in Okeechobee have asked originally for a vision of a roundabout, which at the MPO meeting, the Martin County commissioners realized that is probably unnecessary and a little more grandiose than we would need way out in that rural intersection. So the realignment of the intersection and the possibility of a future traffic light, all I think are important safety issues. Anyone that's been out that way realizes that it's dangerous, especially in the very dark of night. If we would need concurrence from the board of Martin County Commissioners that Martin County would handle the maintenance of the new intersection, not the construction of the new intersection, but the maintenance thereafter, and the possibility of maintenance for a future light. So it was my responsibility as the district commissioner to bring it to the county commission, and that's what I just did.
Commissioner Smith.
Thanks, Ed, for bringing that back up. And it was a discussion, and I think what it really kind of came down to is that Okeechobee and I guess it's District 4?
We're 4, they're 1.
They're 1, right. Didn't want to maintain or didn't want to have to absorb the cost of doing so. And I think at our conversation during the MPO meeting, it was very clear that the MPO members anyway thought that was of significant importance to us, certainly as a community, that we do everything within our power to make that connection happen. So, Madam Chair, if Commissioner Campy would make a motion to do that we send a letter confirming from the Martin County Commission maybe to FDOT, both districts and Okeechobee, that at least from our perspective, I'm supportive of it, that we take on the role. And I think it was also not only the maintenance of the light, Ed, but I think it was also the maintenance of that 300 or 400 foot stretch of roadway.
The intersection
from,
itself and the whole area leading up to and away from.
so if you're all familiar, when you go out there, you take a hard left-hand turn, and right where you take that left-hand turn becomes Martin County. If you were to go straight, it's in Okeechobee County. So we would take on the absorption of that, maintenance of that section of road. So
I'd make a motion to have our MPO staff send a letter to all necessary and needed parties that Martin County Board of County Commissioners is in concurrence with the fact that we would handle the future maintenance of that project.
second.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Campy, seconded by Commissioner Smith. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have another responsibility that I received from our tax collector, Ruth Pietruszewski. Sadly, they had an employee recently that had been waiting on a heart transplant who has sadly passed away before receiving that transplant. He was in his early 40s. He worked in the tax collector's office, and Ruth and her staff, in an effort to honor his life and to celebrate his life, have entered into a Donate Life contest, and they created something called Arthur's Garden. And it's a contest on Facebook that is judging and calculating the amount of likes and the interaction that the public has with these different entries on the facebook.com Donate Life FL. So if you went to Facebook, www.facebook.com/Donate Life FL, and looked through the photographs that are there, scroll through the pictures, and like Arthur's Garden, Martin County, the winner of that contest will receive a financial benefit which would assist his parents. And it would be a way of not only the tax collector's staff honoring one of their own, it would be a way for Martin County residents to recognize and honor one of our residents and one of our hardworking employees who has tragically passed away. So again, it's go to Facebook, search Donate Life FL, and then look for Arthur's Garden, Martin County. The contest ends this Thursday, so if you could do it today and tomorrow and Thursday, maybe if we put that out to our community, I know what a giving, caring community we have, we can sort of show his family our compassion as well. And finally, Madam Chair, I'd like to welcome Layla Ponders, our new clerk for the board. As if you were watching our last meeting, Mary Kay Vittel had retired after 30 years of serving us, 20 years as the clerk, and today is Layla's first day. I'd like to welcome you. This is the first day of your 30 years with the board. And so we're so appreciative to have you for the next 3 decades. Thank you and welcome. Thank you.
Really?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all.
Good. Thank you. Commissioner Smith.
I'm all set this morning. Thank you.
Commissioner Jenkins.
Anybody that went into or frequented the tax collector's office in Hope Sound knew Arthur. He sat at the front desk. He had relationships with an amazing amount of people, and his passing is very sad. So I want to reiterate what Commissioner Campy said. He was a very important part of our community that we, until he's not there anymore, you don't really appreciate. So he was a wonderful guy. I was reluctant to bring this up, but I have a few meetings that I attend at the St. Lucie County Administration Building. Last time I was up there, last time I was up there, they have totally done away with all their mask mandates in their buildings, and I just, I'm vaccinated. I'm a month past my second vaccination, and I'm just wondering where we're going to end this, and I would like to do it sooner rather than later. Ms. Krista, what is our plan?
Well, Commissioner Jenkins, from a staff perspective, what we've been discussing is in our minds, and the board can do whatever they want, but the governor did not take specific action relative to the age variation until just a few weeks ago. It was like the middle of April, given their take. So for us, our employees that met that new criteria were able to, at that point, get scheduled for their first vaccine. And so we were kind of in our minds calculating that if you got your first vaccine toward the middle or end of April, then your second vaccine would come due either the middle of, toward the middle of May or the end of May. So we were communicating to staff that we were going to keep it in place for the buildings until the end of May, just to give ourselves that comfort zone, if you will. And then as of June 1st, we would lift those restrictions. That's our current plan. But if the board chooses to do otherwise, just let us know. And,
That's logical, as long as we have a plan. I'll
Yes.
grit my teeth and get through it.
I appreciate that.
Not having a plan, and the public not knowing what our plan is.
No, we have a plan, and we've also extended the emergency family medical leave, and we were expecting for that to expire as well as an employer. So starting June 1st, we're, employees need to be aware that that's the plan.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Does that mean you're ready?
I'm ready for it.
Thank you. And Miss Krista?
No, I'm good, thank you.
I'm all set too. Miss Woods? Okay. All right. Now we can start with our request for presentation. And this morning we have with us Martin County Sheriff William Snyder, and who will make a presentation regarding the societal crisis his office is experiencing. Welcome.
Madam Chair, good morning. Commissioners, good morning. Good to be here with you. Madam Administrator was there just a second ago.
She was there.
I feel like, and I also like to thank my staff that's come with me today, my Chief Deputy, Bob Seaman, and Major John Budenseek. Our CFO is sitting behind me also, and then some of their staff. David Hadawi is here. He's also in charge of all of our communications. And then Stephen Warnock is going to help me here, a veteran of the United States Marine Corps, and we thank you for your service. I never forget to say that. I think the timing is just, everything Commissioner heard in life seems to be timing. When I began to contemplate that I wanted to share with you what we're seeing with the crisis of mental illness here in our community, I didn't realize that I was going to set it up for the month that was actually Mental Health Awareness Month. And then I was thinking, as the presenters were here this morning, every one of them, the mother with the son, I can't remember the name of the ailment, but the speaking issue, of course, the Salvation Army, and then there was one other presentation, of course, the Mental Illness Month. But they all seem to have, Commissioner Jenkins, they all seem to have the same kind of feel, and that is, we are our brother's keeper. When Cain and Abel ended up in the debacle where Cain kills his brother, he says to the Lord when he says, "Where's your brother?" He says, "Am I my brother's keeper?" Well, that question has hung in the balance of mankind from then until today. Really, are we our brother's keeper? Do we have some fundamental need, obligation to help our fellow citizen, our fellow man, our fellow woman? I think the answer is yes. And to that end, I wanted to share with you what we're seeing with mental illness here in Martin County. Now, I know as appropriators, I can feel it. What's he going to ask for? Let me tell you something. I'm going to be the only presenter today that doesn't ask you for anything. Honestly, I want to just share with you what we're seeing and put it out there so that we can holistically as a community not only be aware of it, but as, in the days, weeks, months, years to come, this is not going away, that we can all work together to try to alleviate some of the suffering that we're seeing. So, Stephen, my trusty right-hand person there, starting in January of 2019 through April 30th, of this year, we've had 2,358 calls for service directly related to mental health crises of some kind. So what does that mean? That means that 2,358 times somebody in our community within the 540 square miles of Martin County has found a situation in their family or personally that is so troublesome and that it's become impossible to deal with, and they've dialed 911. That is an awful lot of calls for service. I mean, every time we do that, we go to that call for service, we set in motion a whole lot of variable potentialities, and we're going to see that here in just a minute. Go ahead, Steve. There were 1,913 behavioral health incidents in 2 full years. So what is that? What were they? Take a look at the 2 columns on the left. You all see that, right? The presentation. In 2019, we had 766 Baker Acts. In 2020, we had 711. So of all of those calls, 766 and 711, not a huge statistical difference, and we can talk about why I think they actually do go down some. It showed every one of those was one of those 2,000 calls that we looked at that was so complex. The person was so challenged when we were there that they actually had to be taken away against their will for their safety or for the safety of others. Also in that big number we saw, I think it was 2,300, in 2019 we had 186 overdoses. I'm not a psychologist, I don't play one anywhere, but I don't know that you can extrapolate overdose issues from mental health. I'm not going to go into all the psychological factors. I'm a cop, and that's who I play. But I think there's a correlation between people that are taking so many drugs that they actually get sick and require law enforcement and fire rescue intervention and mental illness. And then we saw a statistically important difference in 2020. Those overdoses went up to 224. So you can see that's not a good trend line there. In 2019, 8 people died of suicide. 2020, last year, we had 18. That is statistically shocking. 18 people died. There would have been, I don't know, my law enforcement people behind me can jump up if they think I'm wrong, but I think that number would have quadrupled or worse if we didn't have the anti-drug Narcan. We save lives. I don't know that a shift goes by, Commissioner Smith, that we don't save someone's life with Narcan. They're carrying it themselves. Now, one of the numbers that you're not seeing here are self-taking, I don't even know how to describe it, situations where people are taking care of the mental illness crisis themselves. They've rushed a loved one to the hospital, or a lot of those we don't get to report on. If you walk in, present with an overdose, and the hospital deals with you, we won't get it. So those are some of the numbers that we're seeing. Go ahead, Steve. The Baker Acts from January 2020 to April 2020 compared to the same time this year, you see the bump back up. We're seeing it. We saw it going down for a bit, commissioners, but it went back up. I think 256 to 300 is statistically telling. The overdoses from 20 to 21 went down. And one of the reasons we know they went down, well, we know as much as we can know anything, we've started marchment acting, which means involuntarily taking someone into custody for a drug or alcohol problem. We realized, I think it was Chief Seaman just had an epiphany one day. We're going to these overdoses. We're going to the hospital. We call narcotics. We look at it from the criminal aspect. What can we do about this? Where'd you get these drugs? Why are you overdosing? And then we said, what are we doing? We're leaving the biggest piece of this undone, so we're marchment acting them. So I'm hopeful we're going to see our overdoses come down. The other thing is in 2020, COVID was so rampant, and law enforcement was back on its heels. The whole we won't go into the whole thing, but we were not able to stay as focused on narcotics investigations. And we're seeing now, once we get back out on the streets and we put boots on the ground and start interrupting the drug flow from Palm Beach County and St. Lucie County into our county, we see our numbers coming back down. And then, of course, the suicides we talked about. Steve? And please, if you have a question, would you all stop me? I'm trying to be sensitive with your time. I know you all have so much to do. It has often been said, and I say it a lot, I have the honor of being the caretaker of our correctional institute. I don't look at that as a chore or a job. It's an honor to try to prepare a place where people who are awaiting trial can be treated in a dignified manner, fed properly, and kept safe. But what's happened is it has devolved into the largest mental health facility in Martin County. Now, the good gentleman from New Horizons was up here. He can't touch my numbers. I've got them. He gets them for 72 hours for evaluation, and then I'm sure some stay longer. But you know where the mentally ill are in this county? They're behind Walmart. Less now, because of the building. They're in homeless camps. They're in my jail. In 2020, last year, we had in the I'm trying to remember. Yes, we had 964 mental health visits inside of our correctional facility. That meant that 964 of our inmates that we're responsible for needed mental health counseling in the jail. And then in 2021, it's gone up already to 1,164. So what's happening is the jail, flip to that next slide that's coming up, Steve, please. Look at that one, and then I'll finish off the thought on those two. In 2020, 49 new psychiatric medications. So people coming in who had not been on psychotropic medications were placed on it. Look at 2021, 82 already. 82 already. That is, we've already seen a 67% increase in new psychiatric medications. So where are they getting treated? Getting treated in my jail. These are new. These aren't people that come in that are already prescribed psychotropics. If they come in, we arrest them and say, look, I'm on, fill in the blank. We see to it that they get their medications. These have never, ever been seen that we know of. Steve? So what's the impact on law enforcement? Of course, my bias is always what's the impact on me. That's my first bias. But my huge concern is what's the impact on the community. This is one night, very recently, and we don't. This is a little unusual. It's not that unusual. We see it. We see some piece of this at least once or twice a week where it's this bad, but every night we see something. One shift. At 6:59, the first crisis call comes in. It's a suicide threat. 3 minutes later, we get reports of shots fired. A subject was trying to shoot ghosts in his home. What is that, 3 hours and 2 minutes later? Third incident, suicide threat. 12 minutes after that, somebody calls in, I'm having suicidal thoughts, or maybe a loved one called in. And then, 5 minutes later, a suicide threat. That's call of mental health crisis. Now, just looking at that is a little white writing on black paper. It doesn't sound like such a big deal, but every one of those require at least two deputies. And we're going to see here in a minute, every one of those calls triggers a chain of events which can end in tragedy, because we're intersecting with people that are having a mental health crisis rather than a trained psychiatric or a psychologist. Steve? Look at these dots. We were trying to be careful. We didn't want to show We wanted to show it as it was and not be too focused on individual communities and raise questions. But every one of those green dots, as they're popping up on the screen, are one of those calls. Look at that. That's everywhere in the county. In case anybody is laboring under the false hope or illusion that these are happening in more challenged neighborhoods, that, okay, law enforcement's going to fill in the blank neighborhood because they're underserved, under whatever, don't have enough. And some of that's true. We do have some communities where the homeowners, where the people that live tend to have less insurance. That's everywhere in our county. That's in all your districts. And every one of those green dots has a potential for us. It has the potential that we have a deputy-involved shooting, which is always my biggest fear. And we're seeing that around the country. You know, a lot of these triggering events that have resulted in the tensions that we're seeing in communities around the country, they were mentally ill people. If not all of them, certainly, but there's a good bit of it. Some of them are coming to my mind. I'm not going to get into the whole list, but they were springboarded from a mental health problem, a mental health call. Go ahead, Stephen. Please. So when you see that green dot, when you see the little writing, it's like, okay, it's a police thing. Are there any children left in the room? I'm going to there's a couple of off-color bad words in this one. We're going to do our best. We thought if that lady would have stayed, we would have muted it. But you're going to lose some of it. So are we okay? Sure. There'll be some words in here. Okay. This is a green dot. I want to bring some life to the green dot.
Has it been diagnosed with anything? Yeah. Well, I just had him taken over.
It's very recent.
We'll talk to you right now, man. I wasn't threatening anybody, man. We'll talk to you right now. Take your hands out of your pockets, please. Hands are fucking in my pockets, man. They're in your pockets. Take them out. Not fucking in my pockets, man.
Gun, I got less lethal.
No, man.
Get out less lethal.
Man. Brandon. I have a pistol too, man. You. Please don't hurt him. Put the knife down. Man. Put the knife down. I'm coming after you.
Brandon. Brandon.
Put the knife down. Please don't hurt him. Stop doing anything, man.
Hollister, 1-1. Brendan.
No, you,
Stop
man.
this, dude.
You.
Hollister, 1-1. Start medic.
Okay. I didn't think there was any need to show him being shot. He was shot. And we could spend all day on this. This is not a class on police techniques, but what this is a just for you to be aware that when you see those green dots, when you hear me say there's 2,315, every single one of them, with some exception, obviously, you know, a 79-year-old grandfather won't take his meds, or, you know, sometimes we'll get calls like, we're not even sure why you called. But a large proportion of those green dots moving around through your communities, through where you live, through your neighbors' communities, can result in this. This is what we're seeing day in and day out. Steve? So what are we doing? We're going to talk for just a minute on what we're doing, and then I'm going to bring it in for landing. We're changing right now as we speak. I've got my communications director here. We're changing the way we go to these calls, because that call you just saw was that would have probably been a level 2, a call for service with no violence, or a level 3, a potential for violence. It depends on what they tell our dispatchers. We're going to have to retrain our dispatchers. We're going to have to change the way we do business. We can't just send deputies to every call, and that's a mental health crisis, until we get some more information. And I think law enforcement agencies are doing this all over the country. I haven't seen anybody that's done a chart like this, but we're going to color code and be more sensitive. What we don't want is what you just saw. That's my fear. That's what keeps me up at night. I hear these calls. I hear them all day long. My people hear them all day long. My son won't take his medication. He's in his room destroying his furniture. Does he have any weapons? No. What house doesn't have a weapon? What house doesn't have a baseball bat, a butcher knife, a gun? Go ahead, Steve. So what are we doing in addition, of course, to changing our methodology on how we respond? We have CIT, which is crisis intervention training for we're getting it we're getting close to every one of our first responders. We are putting together a behavioral health unit currently, and we do have people in place, which has a really important component, Commissioner Hurd, and that's case management. What set this off was the oddest thing. I was going through up my driveway one day. You know, you all have been to the sheriff's office, and I saw someone walking out with a brown bag. Well, to you or to the average person, that might not mean much, but to me, I know what's going on. They just got out of jail. And I said to myself as I was walking out, I saw the look on the fellow's face. I said, I'll see you in a few days. And at that minute, I said, you know what? That's wrong. Something's wrong here. I have accepted recidivism as a background noise. I'm the sheriff, and I'm not keen on it. That was pathetic. And that began this change in trajectory as I began to realize, look, this isn't right. And the recidivists, many times, are mentally ill. So we have case management in the jail. We have full-time mental health counselors and a 90-day transitional inmate corrections program. Right now, we haven't had to spend an extra penny on it. I would have thanked our fellow from New Horizons. They have given us people to use. And very importantly, we're formulating now, we're trying to put together in our head, how do we best respond to these calls when the colors are moving in the wrong direction? You know, if it's kind of a white, yellow, but as it's moving, what do? I still just have, look at this. Look, this is how we respond. What are my tools that I'm wearing? I have a gun, and then they have tasers. Other than that, that's it. What am I going to do? There's not a lot of, Commissioner, you know things in the world. When your electric's not working, do you call a plumber? Why? Because the plumber I think Commissioner Smith's alleging that you do, actually. The reason you don't call a plumber is because the plumber doesn't have the right tools. These are the only tools I have. So we're going to try to figure out, is there a better methodology? Should I send somebody to these calls who's not dressed like I am? Even dogs don't like me. When they see this, all this stuff, dogs hate uniformed cops. I mean, things are going on. And there's no comparison, but people that are in some kind of crisis, they see this, it makes it worse. 9 times out of 10, it makes it worse. You know, I come to your house, Commissioner Hurd, because you're reporting a stolen bicycle. You see me and you go, oh, I know what that means. That means somebody's here to write my report. We don't know what these people see. Those green dots, we don't know what they're seeing when we walk up. And you saw that young man's response. He got worse and worse until finally he was shot. So if we can put together a different way to respond to these calls, whether it be an unmarked car, deputies that are probably wearing a sports coat, fully armed, and then can I have first responders, civilians who have better training than we can ever get, you know, psychologists, experts in the field, can they co-respond? Can we call them to the scene to help stabilize and to help us think through what are the right steps? You know, if I tell you this person has fill-in-the-blank mental illness, how are they going to respond? Do I need to speak differently or whatever? So that's probably the biggest thing that I'll talk about today, is we are actively looking at changing the way we respond to these calls. Steve? Before this year's over, we expect, based on the current trend, this is our last slide, isn't it, Steve? We expect 1,116 calls for service involving people that are in some kind of mental health crisis. And so my reason for coming today was purely this, to share this with you, to bring it to your minds, to help us all look for community-based solutions. You know, when the Supreme Court, I think it was in the 80s, because they still had mental health institutes when I started, they completely depopulated long-term mental health facilities. Well, I think the hope was at that time that they would go into community-based management. That never happened. So they went into community-based homeless living. They went into community-based jails. They went into community-based morgues. There are no long-term solution places for this, Commissioner. There's nowhere we can bring anybody. There's no real solution that we know of. So what we're trying to do is manage it, cut the risk, not get ourselves to where we've already shot. We've had, how many deputies do we have that we had to slow down because of administrative leave? 5. I've had 5 deputies in the last few months that have pulled triggers and shot people, all with mental illness. And that's despite all of our best efforts. And it would have been a lot more if we hadn't backed off and taken as much time as we have. We can't have that. And I cannot have that. It's a human rights issue. And I know I'm going to do everything I can to bend the curve. And as we all go forward collectively, it's all a challenge. It's not just mine, obviously. You're very important in that. You stay sensitive to it. If you see funding opportunities, if you have thoughts, please share it with me. And with that, unless there's a question, I'm through.
Great. Sheriff, the numbers that you presented, are those including youth, or is that 18 and over only?
That would be all ages, Commissioner.
All ages. Because, and I like the fact that you incorporated the substance abuse, because what I see with our teenagers, that the substance abuse is absolutely out of control. And then you have teenagers counseling teenagers, which leads to, suicide. And so, in my mind, how do we prevent some of this as early as 5th grade? We see some of these substance abuse, and then it evolves into mental health, and I think it evolves to what you're seeing on the street.
My sense is, Commissioner, and that's a great question, is that most of the times, I'm not a psychologist. If there's someone out there listening that knows what they're talking about, you can correct me. I think people that use drugs obsessively are self-medicating because of mental illness. That's what I believe. That's what I see. That's just anecdotal data. So if your question is, how do we really bend the curve? It definitely is with stronger, healthier homes, children with less pressure, the bullying, the craziness that goes on the internet. I mean, we don't have time today to talk about all the socio-economic issues that go into the mental health crisis. But our SROs are swamped with this. I mean, the Florida legislature was wrestling with the bill this year. I don't even know if it passed. That before you left the school Baker acting a child, you had to contact the parents. It's a problem in our schools at all ages.
Yeah, in my mind, we need to do more early on for prevention, society-wide, so that, maybe some of these adult, we can prevent some of this. Commissioner Campy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sheriff, thank you very much. You and I had the opportunity to discuss this a little bit, and I'm so happy that you came with your team for a couple of reasons. One, not just to share the information because it's important, but also a lot of people that watch these meetings, this is another medium for you to get the message out and to heed the call. We also have our news media here, so your message today to us is having a ripple effect, which is important. I also wanted to acknowledge the leadership team of Tykes and Teens is here. We are very fortunate in Martin County and on the Treasure Coast. When Commissioner Hetherington asks, how do you stop this from, teenage and adults, they're doing that with children. And sadly, I know that their numbers have increased with the pandemic and the emotional distress that many, mentally healthy adults have gone through that never would have thought they would have had, the depression and the anxiety and the thoughts of harming themselves. People that were 2 years ago perfectly even-keeled are struggling with this. There are a lot of safety nets in place beyond, I feel personally, by the time it elevates to your level and your professional staff's level, it's late. I mean, when you're calling 911 on a family member or a loved one or a neighbor for law enforcement assistance, it's late in the process. I thought that video, I was nervous when you're showing it, but I'm glad that you did, because it's real, and we can, some folks can choose to make believe it's not an issue, or not an issue here in Martin County, but it is. I think that I agree with you that, there's certain folks that have criminal activity and a criminal mindset, but then there's other folks that are not criminals, that are suffering from mental health issues, that have gotten addicted You know, a lot of times, especially in my generation, I think when people think of drug addiction and misusing of drugs, they're thinking heroin and cocaine and those types of things. But I think if you asked an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old, when they think about drug abuse and addiction, it's opioids and it's pills more so than the street drugs that people are thinking that bad people are doing heroin. There's been a lot of talk about suicide by cop. I mean, I know that having family members in law enforcement, you know, I like your approach that, hey, you wouldn't show up wearing the uniform and that the people might be dressed a little more in plain clothes. But I'm also really concerned for the law enforcement personnel that shows up in someone's close quarters, living room or bedroom, where you heard in that video where the parents are saying, please don't hurt him, please don't hurt him, please don't hurt him. Well, that person can hurt themselves, they can hurt the family members, they can hurt someone else in the public, or hurt your people. And some people, you know, when a deputy shows up and they're trying to rationalize and sort of take into consideration the scene, well, the wild card is the person. There's no way to comprehend, no matter how much training, what can happen in that scenario. And no one likes to hear, and I'm sure law enforcement, the last thing they want to do is shoot a civilian, shoot a person. But I want that law enforcement personnel to go home to their family that night. You know, when that split decision has to be made, it's tricky. I think that, to Commissioner Hetherington's point, we have to not only beef up and do whatever you need us to do when we get to your level, but when we're having budget discussions and we're having our grants and aids discussions, many times we talk about what our not-for-profits are doing. They need to be properly funded. You know, there is private funding, there is state funding and federal funding, but locally, we're right here in our own community. And when I talked earlier about the project that the tax collector is working on, we need to step up as a community. I think the first part is recognizing that there is a problem, and we have one. Teen suicide and teen harm and teen self-medication is real. Commissioner Hetherington and I have school-aged children. You know, Commissioner Smith is on his way. He'll eventually have a school-aged child as well. And so these are real issues for us. And whether it's our own family members or friends of our children, it's very real. And so I appreciate very much that you've come today. If you're on the cutting edge of so many technologies and so many initiatives, you and your team at the Martin County Sheriff's Office. I said this to you yesterday. If there are programs or things that you can put into place that you feel that the funding is not there, please let us know. Because we can't just congratulate you and clap when you leave and then just expect you to handle all of these things. Our not-for-profits need to be funded differently. Our teachers need to be supported with their SROs, our churches and mental health professionals. I think that I'll tell you that beyond the not-for-profits, the individual mental health professionals, whether they're therapists or social workers or psychiatrists or psychologists, we don't have enough of them in Martin County or on the Treasure Coast for people that are aware. It's not all parents that didn't realize that their children were heading down in the wrong direction. Some of them are completely aware of what's happening and just don't know how to avail themselves to the resources. So if they're young, I would start with New Horizons and Tyson Teens and these other organizations that we have. But as a parent, I would say that if you're struggling with understanding what's happening with your loved one, whether it's a spouse or a child, or sibling, before you have to call 911, reach out somewhere else first. 911 to me is the last resort, not the first. And if you waited so long that you need sheriff's deputies to show up and mitigate a situation in your home, you got to reach out. There are programs. Maybe, Ms. Krista, we can, especially since it's Mental Health Awareness Month, we can put some hot topics on our homepage at the county's website. I know that Michelle is here, and she's been working on MCTV programming for some of these issues. Every month is Mental Health Awareness Month. It's not just this month, but if we can give some families a little bit of an encouragement, you coming today was well worth it. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Commissioner Smith.
Sheriff, thank you, and I'm sure that you talked to all of us prior to coming, which was great. There's no wonder why, if you're not the best sheriff in the state of Florida, you're certainly right up there with the best of them. And I say that for a reason, because you could have just taken this and dealt with your staff and dealt with your department and said, this is what it is and this is what we're doing, and end of story. I always appreciate when it's our clerk, when it's our sheriff, it's someone reaches out to us and says, hey, we got a much bigger problem going on than, and it's not that the sheriff's department can't per se handle what you're handling. You will, and you do. But it's a much bigger problem than that. And I'm sure all of us really appreciate the fact that our constitutionals reach out to us and say, when there's something wrong or something a problem, you do that. And you don't have to, but you do. And I think that puts you at certainly the head of the class, that not only is it important for us to understand your perspective and what you're dealing with, but the community to further understand, as both Ed and Stacy have said. When you and I talk, I'm already starting to think, like, what's the next step? Where do we go? What do we do? I asked the sheriff, I assume all the other sheriffs are communicating the same discussion. And the sheriffs, like us as commissioners, get together and they have their conversations. So this is not just a Martin County issue, clearly. It's not just a Florida issue. I'm sure it's national, that we have a problem across the country. And so, one of the questions I asked the sheriff was, what's the state think about all of this? What's their approach to this? Because at some point in time, it's not just the sheriff, it's not just the county, there's a state level of involvement as well, whether it's a funding, whether it's legislation, whether it's action, facilities. And so I think, some years back, probably 15 years ago, drug abuse was really on the rise in our school system. And all of our agencies that touch kids, Children's Services Council, everybody got together over at Indian Riverside Park and really put their heads together and said, what are we going to do about it? We've got it. The direction we're going in isn't working, or it's not enough or something. And there was a real concerted effort back then from everybody to say, okay, everybody has a role, everybody has a piece of this. It's not just one that's going to solve the problem. And so, what my mind started thinking is it time to get everybody back together and say, okay, here's where we are, right? And what are the various asks? What are the things that need to come out of a conversation like that? There may be 3, 4, 5 different actions that come out of that. One may be that there's, as Ed was just talking, there, on our end at the county level, there may be more that we need to do financially or supporting our nonprofits. Maybe that's a component that we have. At the legislature side of this thing, and certainly at the state level, we talked, and maybe there's really a time where we have finally reached a point where there need to be facility-specific locations, to where, is it really the right place to have the 1,100 individuals in your jail? Is that really like what we've come to? Probably not, I'm guessing, at least from what you said. And so where is the right place? And if New Horizons can only do X amount of hours, and it's not that that's not the right place for those X amount of hours, but that obviously isn't long-term enough to deal with the much more systemic problem that exists. So just a suggestion, maybe we should get people together and say, okay, what are our roles? What needs to be talked about? What do we need to ask the legislature for? I mean, it's a shame session just ended, but next year, what should we be building up to, saying, what the 5 of us need to take to the Association of Counties to support for legislation, if there is such a thing? I don't know, but if there is, I would say now is the time to start trying to figure out how to do that. So thank you very much. Thank you for being the sheriff that you are, and especially the folks sitting in back of you for supporting us and doing all they do for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I would agree. Thank you so much, Sheriff, for being here today.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, we are going to take a 10-minute break and come back at 10:25 to reconvene with public hearing number 1. You're on. Okay. Okay, welcome back to our May 11th County Commission meeting, and we are going to resume today with public hearing number 1, legislative public hearing to consider adoption of the comprehensive plan amendment, CPA 21-03, and that will be presented by Irene Settlemeyer.
Good morning, members of the Board of County Commissioners. Irene Settlemeyer, Principal Planner with the Growth Management Department. So this is the adoption public hearing on CPA 2103. There was a public hearing held before the local planning agency on March 4th, and the transmittal public hearing was held before the Board of County Commissioners on March 23rd. We have received no public comments from the state and regional reviewing agencies with regard to any impacts on state or regional resources. Today, my presentation is going to focus on the marine waterfront commercial future land use designation in the CRAs. It goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. Of course, any other policy that the board wants to look at, we're glad to review. You will recall that the Marine Service Area Policy prohibits development of permanent residential uses in a marine service area. It also provides that land development regulations should be adopted in order to permit a landowner to petition to change the map of marine service areas under certain circumstances. So Chapter 18, as adopted, retains the marine service areas in the CRAs. It references the Chapter 4 policies. So this slide summarizes what was proposed to the board on March 23rd, that we would bring forward the Chapter 4 Marine Service Area Policy into Chapter 18 and establish for a petition by landowners to change the map. This slide summarizes the direction of the board at that meeting to transmit the amendment to remove the marine service area language and to suggest language to further define how residential, commercial, and marine and working waterfront can coexist. This objective, the slides now when I'm presenting the objectives and the policies, they are presented as if the edits indicated by the strike through and underline have been made. So the text in these next few slides is as it would read with the edits made. So this slide, following the board's direction, provides that the CRAs, the Marine Waterfront Commercial Future Land Use Designation will be governed by Chapter 18. That's the same text that was presented last month. These policies emphasize the importance of water-dependent and water-related uses. The only change in paragraph 1 from what was presented in March was the identification of the 3 specific water bodies in the 3 CRAs that are impacted by these policies. The paragraph 2 has just been changed for simplicity and clarity. The content really hasn't. It provides that paragraph 2, residential development is permitted in a mixed-use project in the marine waterfront commercial future land use when public access to the waterfront is provided. Nothing has changed in this slide. The residential and hotel density is the same as what applies countywide outside the CRAs. Outside the CRAs, the minimum open space is 30%. Maximum building height depends on whether it's a water-related use or a water-dependent use. This is the same text that was presented last month. The text in these 2 paragraphs is identical to what was presented in March, provides for a waterfront subdistrict, and it provides that the land development regulations shall protect nearby residential areas and protect environmentally sensitive areas. So the text in Chapter 3 is new, that the land development regulations shall be adopted to provide requirements governing public access to the waterfront in the CRA. Paragraph 4 is the same as was presented previously, that the land development regulations shall provide the detailed development regulations. This text is identical to as it, I believe, in Chapter 18 now, and as was presented before. The other coastal element policies, goals, policies, and objectives remain in effect in the CRAs. So in summary, comparing what's in Chapter 18 now to what we are presenting today, the changes are, number one, that Chapter 18 does not reference Chapter 4, the future land use element, regarding the marine waterfront commercial future land use. The policies governing that future land use designation are entirely found in Chapter 18. The marine service area policies will not apply in the CRAs. Residential development is permitted in the marine waterfront commercial future land use as part of a mixed-use project that provides public access to the waterfront. We've clarified that. There's been an assumption about public access to the waterfront in mixed-use projects, but we're putting those words in the policies. We're proposing that they be put in the policies. And then fourth, that land development regulations must be adopted to define what public access to the waterfront means. So there are the four changes from what exists now to what is being proposed. Now, because the comp plan text simply provides that LDRs, paragraph 3, LDRs shall be adopted to provide requirements governing public access to the waterfront in the CRA, we're going to venture a little bit into the content of the public hearing on Article 12 now, just to help illustrate and give some context to this paragraph 3. The board will, of course, take separate action. This is the public hearing on the CPA 2103. I'm just going to provide a little input about the LDRs that are proposed, but that's a separate public hearing, separate action by the board. So the LDRs do two things. One is they incorporate into the LDR the Chapter 18 policies regarding the shoreline protection zone. So these policies on the slide here, they are in effect, they're in Chapter 18. The only change is that we are bringing them into the LDR so that relevant related regulations are in one location. These policies apply only to the CRA Center and to the Marine Waterfront Commercial Future Land Use Designation. The second thing that we're proposing for the land development regulations is that we provide for public access to the waterfront. And the proposed regulations provide, as on this screen, 50% of the length of the shoreline on the property shall be accessible to the public. A boardwalk or pervious walkway no less than 10 feet wide shall be provided. Public access is not restricted to paying guests or patrons. Public access shall be shown on the site plan, and outside of the pervious walkway and the 40% of the shoreline protection zone that can be developed, that the remainder shall be landscaped with native vegetation. So this content is proposed for the board's consideration in response to your direction to us on March 23rd. And that concludes my presentation. And me and the team are happy to answer any questions that you have. Staff recommendation is that the board adopt CPA 2103 as presented in this public hearing. Thank you.
Okay, good. We have one public comment, and then I'll go ahead and take commissioner comments. If you would like to public comment on this item, then please fill out a comment form. The one I have is Mr. John Uden. Good morning.
Morning, Commissioners. My name is John Uden. I'm here today on behalf of the Marine Industries Association of the Treasure Coast. Unfortunately, our Board of Directors has unanimously voted to not support the language that has been proposed to you today. We do not believe the current proposal is in the best interest of the boating public, and we don't believe that this proposal has been sufficiently vetted or thought through. From what we've been able to gather, this was brought to you March 23rd. Nobody ever spoke to us or anybody else in the business community that we can find. And then somehow the language that was brought to you was somehow morphed into what's being presented today, and then you directed them to bring that forward. So that raises some concerns for us today, if that is in fact how we got here. Why? Our first question would be is, when did this issue surface at the board, and for what reason did it surface? And then if it has been floating around there for sufficient time before March 23rd, why has nobody ever come and talked to us? Nobody has talked to anybody in the business community that we've been able to identify. And if they brought forth this proposal on March 23rd without any input from anybody in the community, why does anybody have any confidence that this has been thoroughly vetted or thought through appropriately? I can tell you conceptually, our association has no problem with residential uses or mixed-use projects. There's a lot of very nice projects like that around the state. But this doesn't seek to create those kind of projects. What this does is this proposal seems to provide incentives to create private docks behind condominiums in marine commercial waterfront in the CRAs. When we had our meeting with staff last week, they kept insisting that this should move forward because it's one of the main reasons anyway was because that you can build hotels and restaurants in the CRAs right now. Well, first of all, that's not a reason to move forward and jeopardize the working waterfronts. But secondly, if that is the case, that hasn't been done over the course of the last 15 years or 20 years since this comp plan language has been in effect. So there's other factors that are limiting that, and that's probably the CRA. The other issue, and I'll just wrap up quickly, is we have an issue with the 50% public access, because all you're doing is creating a boardwalk mandate there instead of creating incentives for other types.
Time's up, John. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more public comment for Marcella Campbell.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Marcella Camblor for the record, and I'm here as a planner, as a representative for an applicant that has a project in one of your CRAs, but fundamentally as someone that has been involved in your 7 CRAs since their inception in 1997. You know, in the early 2000s, all of your CRAs created their visions. That was prior to this Marine Service area hatched, being overlaid on all of them. And, you know, over all these, you know, almost 2 decades, plans have come in front of you, and they haven't been implemented for many reasons, but in part because there have been policies and regulations and inconsistencies between land use and zoning that have not allowed projects to actually meet the community's vision. You have invested a lot of time with your staff and the Regional Planning Council in calibrating your code and your land use to actually be able to create those visions. And now this is the last step. This hatch that was put on top of your CRAs after the community's visions were created does not really protect marine services. It only prevents residential from happening there. It's not just to make private docks. You could do a restaurant, you could do a hotel, you could do offices, you could do everything but residential. And many of those visions had residential in that area as well. I just think that this is the last inconsistency to allow those visions to come to fruition. I understand that there may be trickle effect, that this could happen somewhere else if it happens in the CRAs. There is a lot of things that happen in the CRAs that do not happen, nor will they ever happen anywhere else in the county, and this should not be any different. So I support staff's language. I urge you to support it. I think the CRAs are a tremendous economic workhorse for the county. So is the marine industry. So I think both can happen, both should happen, and allowing the CRAs to move forward should not be an impediment for marine services to be protected elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the final public comment form I have. I'm going to take commissioner questions and comments. Commissioner Hearn.
Yeah, I'm on page 111, and I'm going to read from the language. Development on a property with a marine waterfront commercial future land use designation shall have a residential density not exceeding 10 units per acre and a hotel motel density not exceeding 20 units per acre. I remember before there were two separate marine waterfront future land uses. One was for residential and one was for commercial. And now it appears that we've morphed them, and now we're allowing up to 20 units per acre in marine waterfront commercial.
Yes, Commissioner. So there is one marine waterfront commercial future land use.
Why was why were the two separated?
So there were two
into
zoning
one?
districts. Outside of the CRAs, there's a waterfront general commercial zoning district, and there is a waterfront resort. Actually, both this 10 density for the residential development and hotel motel density, that is the standard that applies countywide in both of those zoning districts. It's what applies for that future land use, and it's been incorporated in. So the name waterfront general commercial and waterfront resort commercial, they both actually permit their hotels and residential development.
My reluctance, my fear is that we are abandoning our protection of working waterfront. Nowhere is it more applicable than in Port Salerno. We have the most working waterfront of any of the CRAs. And this is a move that will perhaps eliminate those uses. And I think that we need to do everything that we can to protect them rather than lose them, because the trend now is for bigger and bigger and bigger boats. Those boats are not trailerable. They need to be serviced on waterfront. There has to be waterfront access for these boats to be serviced and repaired. And I think that we're eliminating that by promoting condo and hotel development on marine waterfront commercial properties. Also, in the CRAs, in industrial future land use designations, residential is allowed up to 15 units per acre. Elsewhere in the county, residential is prohibited because of the inherent incompatibility between industrial and residential uses. Also, the shoreline protection zone changes. The shoreline protection zone is there to protect the shoreline. And what we're doing is encroaching upon that protection, saying it's perfectly okay to develop 40% of the shoreline protection zone. And if you put a boardwalk or a walkway in a shoreline protection zone, it has to be at least 10 feet. We're also forcing public access onto the shoreline protection zone. These things are all inconsistent with our desire and for the necessity of protecting our shoreline protection. Shoreline protection zones are there in order to protect water quality. And we're forcing more uses and hurting water quality by allowing more impacts in the shoreline protection zone. and also density calculations in the CRAs. For purposes of calculating density, the gross land area may include 1/2 of any right-of-way adjoining the site. Well, what's the purpose of that? Is just except to just add more density?
Well, the purpose is to equalize the playing field between infill development and new greenfields development. When someone starts, when someone starts off with, say, a 30-acre tract somewhere that maybe, I don't know, used to be ag, and now it's being developed as a residential development, the land area that is allocated to creating streets and to creating stormwater retention and detention, that's all included in the total site area on which density is calculated. We have a gross residential density standard. It's based on gross land area or gross site area. Because the areas like the CRAs, they're already platted lots. When we attempt to apply a density standard, we're actually applying it to the net land area. So this is a potential opportunity. Yes, it could result in more units being on those lots, but it's to equalize the way density is applied to new greenfield development and infill development.
I just see this weakening of our protections as being a disturbing trend. I'm watching in Palm Beach County as commissioners there are approving right-of-way on canal banks to be used for calculating density. It's a slippery slope. You know, it's there's a good reason why people move to Martin County, and it invariably has to do with the protections that we afford our residents and our environment, and weakening those protections just weakens our appeal.
Did you have your light on, Mr. Doolin?
Just a quick note in response. My name is Clyde Doolin, Comprehensive Planning Administrator. For the record, I just wanted to add to Ms. Settlemeyer's response. The language describing density and calculations in the CRA is existing in Chapter 18 at this moment.
So I agree with some of Commissioner Hurd's concerns with protecting working waterfronts, and maybe I'm not defining working waterfronts properly, but the Marine Services District, how does that protect the marine services industry currently?
The Marine Service area?
So I could build a hotel in the Marine Services District currently. I could build a commercial plaza where I sell T-shirts currently, but nothing to do with the marine, a boat business or...
The marine service areas are limited. They only exist in the Marine Waterfront Commercial Future Land Use designation. And the only real prohibition is on permanent residential housing. You can build a hotel, you can build a restaurant. So I hate to say the words out loud. It's not that protective of the marine industry. It protects water-related and water-related uses. It prevents that section of waterfront from becoming completely privatized with residential development where only the residents can have access. It prohibits permanent residential.
So I understand Mr. Udin's concern from the Marine Industries Association, but what I'm maybe perhaps I didn't understand it, and what I just heard you say is that there are very little protections the way it's worded right now with the Marine Services. If I wanted to go and put a commercial plaza in the Marine Services District that has nothing to do with boats or waterfront access, then I could do that. I could absolutely not allow public access. I could sell, trinkets out of it, and that would not be that would not foster the marine services industry on the waterfront. So where is the protection for marine services? in that language? I don't see it.
If I may, it's not the Marine Service Area was directed by the board at the last meeting to take the Marine Service Area hatching off of the lands in the CRA with a community waterfront future land use designation. The map that Irene has on the screen right now shows commercial waterfront land in a kind of a grayish blue all along the shoreline of Jensen
That's
Beach.
Jensen Beach, right?
And the only one that has a hatching is the one with the Marine Service Area extra protection added to it. And nothing in this language would require that that the actual working waterfront activity at that location to go away. They are free to continue doing as they have been for decades. It's a legal, permitted use, and the public access provisions described in this plan text would not be applicable because unless they were to try and redevelop and propose to do a mixture of residential and non-residential uses in that hatched area. So the protections are not, I mean, the protection against residential exclusively is still there. It would have to be a mixture of residential and non-residential in exchange for not, in order to have some residential on it.
And Commissioner, there is text in the zoning code with regard to these other types of development that can occur in the marine waterfront commercial future land use. That office buildings, educational institutions, retail, all of that is supposed to be water related or water dependent. You know, and so there is text in there that is, so I don't know, you know, we sometimes wonder, well, does that mean, you know, all the coffee cups have to have a picture of a manatee or a dolphin, or like how would we enforce that over time? But I think it's more about providing public access to that part of the waterfront. So this is the Port Salerno, the marine waterfront commercial future land use is the blue area. As Commissioner Hurd remarked, that there is a concentration of marine industries in this area. But there are also, for example, you know, in this area here, which is CRA Center, there's boat yards here as well, and they're not in marine waterfront commercial future land use. They're in the CRA Center future land use.
Okay. Commissioner Smith.
So why don't we stay here for a second? So I just interesting if you look at what exists on this chart. So the top big hatching, I assume, is Pirates Cove. Yes. Which has hotel, marine service of sorts, marine storage, docks, and so on. And that's pretty much cemented as to what it would be. For that to change, I think, would be a significant hurdle for anybody to get over that. If you go to the south, you have that thin strip, which is the commercial fishermen area that we have, and we have the land lease, or they have the land lease with the state, and we have an agreement with them to make sure that that stays in place, hopefully as long as we can keep that. If you come further south, as Irene just pointed out, that lot was just cleared recently, but adjacent to it there is boat service area and maintenance. The hatched mark, if you go back into the marine service area, is the Fish House Art Gallery, Marina, and the Twisted Tuna, right, is on the corner, which is already a restaurant. And then across the canal there, you go over to Shrimpers parking lot, boat storage, boat service, and the rest of that remainder hatch mark. And then across the creek, you go over to A&J Boat Works, which is a working waterfront repair, storage, and other facilities. So I don't know in in that scenario where too much would change one way or the other in the existence of what is there today. If we go back to Rio, and you don't necessarily have to go to the map, but you can, I think something that's important to remember about Rio, when we started, all of the CRAs did their master plans back in the early 2000s. We did 3 extensive days of public input and public charretting in Rio. 2 of those nights were in like hellacious rainstorm, nasty events, and we still had probably 30, maybe 40 people show up at the old Civic Center up in Jensen. We did public perception surveys. We did, back then, a lot of like really in-depth, trying to pull from people what they wanted to see happen in Rio. Where was the community's vision in terms of what they wanted to see happen? What's interesting, in the commercial service area on the left-hand side of your image, which is the old Casa Rio Marina, as part of their vision, and this is back in 2001, I think, 2002-ish, there were residential components that were built along the marina that show up on the vision plan, show up in the illustrations that we did. And that was all prior to the No Net Loss program that we did, which has led us to where we are today. So if you really kind of backed up to move forward, we did the No Net Loss program for a reason. In the southern part of the county, there was an exponential occurrence happening in the last ramp up of residential popularity in South Florida, I guess is a good way to say it. They were buying up small marinas because they could, people could afford to, and they were tearing down whatever the commercial establishment that was servicing the marina, and they were buying it for a residential use to put up a single family home, and then hence doing away with the public marina. And we saw that at the time as being sort of a real problem. Like if we all didn't blink too much, we might wake up one day and all of our smaller marinas or larger marinas might be gone. And so that was at least from, as I recall, the genesis or the impetus for moving forward with the No Net Loss program. I don't know that we ever talked about the consequences of what it would mean to the CRA program as a whole. I don't remember that thing. It was really targeted at those smaller marinas down south, and how could we maybe stop what was happening and protect that. And so maybe one of those unintended consequences is where we are today in terms of where we have landed. But ironically, if you were to look at it as kind of a taking, if you will, we took away the ability of something that existed. And I assume, Clyde, the existence of residential in waterfront commercial was back to the inception of the comprehensive plan?
Yes.
So maybe 25 years prior to the existence of when we did the No Net Loss program, we had that element in existence. And you could make the argument moving 20 years forward from that point that, well, you know, the CRAs never took advantage of this, and they never did what was intended to happen, and so on and so forth. And I clearly think there are a lot of reasons why it didn't happen. We had 3 or 4 runs at Rio. People came in, lots of money, and said, hey, there was one that wanted to build 400,000 square foot boat storage condominiums, and that was going to consume almost all of the town center area of Rio. Clearly that had absolutely nothing to do with the vision for Rio and downtown Rio and what the residents said, this is what we want our community to look like when this is all said and done. Thankfully, the economy took a change at that point, and that idea dried up and went away and didn't happen, because it would have been there still today, and we would have all scratched our heads and said, what went wrong? We also didn't have the codes in place, and we didn't have the plans in place to really pull the various resources together. So you could argue that perhaps the last 20 years wasn't the most productive that we would have liked, but this board decided that it would clean up the CRA program with the help of the Regional Planning Council, and we spent 2 years going through it with pretty much a fine-tooth comb to, I think, hopefully facilitate the visions that were back in the early 2000s of the community, the residents, of what they wanted to have seen. I think this is the last piece of it that needs fixing and cleaning up. I think it gives us an opportunity to enhance our commercial waterfront, quite frankly. We have 2 marinas in Rio, one that's been vacated and certainly run down since Francis and Jean, when we lost Jack Baker's restaurant up on the hill, and the marina that was down below it. It has been for all intents and purposes, non-existent, so it has not benefited the marine industries whatsoever. And then the Casa Rayo Marina has gone through multiple different iterations of ownership, but also different levels of service. It also became home to, unfortunately, a huge green algae bloom years ago that took a lot of public observation when we had folks in there trying to clean it all up, which has absolutely nothing to do with this other than to say that marina has gone through a lot of changes over the years. It is currently acting in a service and a storage capacity. But I would argue that the marina itself doesn't necessarily operate at its highest level of capacity that it could operate at. And so, at least from my perspective, the hope of this is to enhance the waterfront. It's to give the folks or the projects the opportunity to see their ability to push that vision for Rayo forward. I would say this too about access to the water. A huge issue for me personally is that it is public access, and that if we are to move forward with residential in any form, shape, or capacity, that people that would be buying into this and understanding where they're moving to and understanding what they're moving into is public access. It's not a gated community, it's not a gated residence, it's not a gated anything. It is open, it's a downtown existence. People will be able to come and go throughout, and that's important, because it does a whole bunch of things. Number one, it puts people on the street, it puts people in on the docks, it keeps people watching what's going on. I would argue that the city of Stuart has been incredibly successful with their waterfront and clearly with their boardwalk system that exists. As a matter of fact, it was successful enough they extended it, and the public uses it, they love it. And I think Rayo, quite frankly, and Jensen, and portions of Port Salerno perhaps, absolutely need and deserve the opportunity to participate in the same levels of success that the city of Stuart has had over the last 20 years. Anything less than that, I think, is sort of, unfortunately, a little bit of a slap to Rayo, that why should not Rayo be able to be what they looked at 20 years ago for their vision, and why should they not have the opportunity to arrive in a place that they consider to be something special? So I think staff has got us in a pretty good position in terms of what you have recommended. I'm supportive of where we're going, and I appreciate everybody's effort in getting us to where we are, at least today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Camping.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had the opportunity to have several conversations with staff, and they presented this information to me a couple of weeks ago. I did have an opportunity to speak to Mr. Uden, who's a friend. I have just a couple of questions for clarification's sake, and I appreciate that you brought the maps up. I felt that the beginning portion of the agenda item was more the wonky kind of language stuff, and people that might have been trying to follow along at home might not have exactly understood what we were talking about until you see these real-world examples. I appreciate what Commissioner Smith did there, walking us through the actual landmark locations, at least in Port Salerno, to have a better understanding for people that are following along at home to discuss exactly what we're talking about. How many sites, I know you had the 3 different maps, how many sites, actual locations, would this language affect? Because it's not a lot, correct? It's not like it's a broad brush you're painting across all of the coastal areas. These are very specific, these hash-marked locations, but are we talking half a dozen?
The 3 CRAs only. This doesn't apply to anything outside the 3 CRAs. The 2 hatched areas you just saw on the Rayo map, the 1 hatched area you saw on the Jensen, and the hatched areas that Irene is bringing up right now on the Port Salerno. And Irene has a very good graph that shows the acreage of this as well, if you'd like to see that.
I guess the maps are better for just sort of wrapping your brain around it versus the acreage. But I guess the acreage is that graph is designed to show that it's not a tremendous amount of acreage, correct? These are small little...
It's about, for both the percentage of the marine waterfront commercial future land use in the county, the percentage that is located in the CRAs is 13 or 14%. And it's the same for the marine service areas. About 13 or 14% of the marine service area land is in the CRAs.
Okay, thank you. My next question was, during Mr. Uden's comments, and he's been very involved with the Marine Industry Association, both locally and at the state level for a long, long time. He felt that there wasn't adequate collaboration or community outreach. But when I asked that question, I had heard that there was. Can you give me an idea of what kind of, because I know normally you guys don't operate in a vacuum, so can you give us a concept of how this process unfolded?
Before the March 23rd presentation, we reached out to the Marine Industries Association, and I believe we sent them, and we had some discussions with Jim Dragseth about the language that we were presenting to the board on the 23rd. And then following that, we reached out to the Marine Industries Association again, and that resulted in discussions last week with I think Michelle and Mr. Uden and Butch. I can't remember his last name.
Really?
And we presented the language that we're discussing here today to them for discussion.
And during those conversations, what was the tone and the theme? Was it a working kind of conversation, and did they discuss options? I did hear Mr. Uden say during his comments that they weren't necessarily opposed to some residential. I'm wondering, like, was there a workshopping kind of a vibe going on, or was it?
There was really, it was a Zoom meeting where we put the language on the screen and we discussed it and the intent. And we certainly were considering the thoughts and comments Mr. Uden was making. They're similar to the ones that have been made here, but we also emphasized that we were given direction on the 23rd to can't spit the word out, take the marine service area hatching off of the maps and come back with language that dealt with public access. And so that's what we have brought forward to you. And we look forward and we are seeking your direction.
Thank you. A couple other questions. Some of the questions that I had asked and had the opportunity to ask staff is, if I was operating a marine, and we keep saying marine services, and Commissioner Hetherington's examples, of businesses that happen to be happening next to the water are not necessarily marine services businesses. You could have a marine themed restaurant anywhere. It doesn't have to necessarily be coastal. But with that in mind, if I was operating a boat repair yard on the water where I could do in-water repairs and maintenance, would any of the things that we're discussing today adversely affect me and my day-to-day operations if I was the owner of the property as well? Like, if I'm just operating my business, this doesn't cause me any type of negative effect, correct?
Correct.
So I guess the concept would be that if my property was worth X as a marine industry business, I could sell it yesterday to build a hotel on it. I could sell it to build a restaurant on it, or office building, or retail space. Anything. The only thing that we're adding here is the ability to go residential, correct?
Only if you do mixed use.
So you'd still have to have offices or restaurants. I know the answer. I'm trying to qualify the answer or define the answer for people that might be following along. So you'd have to have retail or restaurant or office on the first floor?
No, it has a mixed-use project. It's just on the site. It's planned and approved and developed as a single project, but we haven't dictated.
Oh, up or down. Well, some of the sites, the locations are smaller. The only way you could really, you can't spread them all out on single story. You'd have to potentially, go up a little bit. So if you were willing to go to mixed use, you could then have the option of adding residential. That's basically, if we boiled all of what we've discussed thus far down to a single sentence, is we're adding the ability to add residential as long as you had, it couldn't be exclusively residential. It had to have some other mixed use. But if I chose not to do a thing, if my business was doing well and I wanted it to be a generational legacy business, I could just leave it alone. There's no adverse effect on me.
Correct.
And there's not a tremendous amount of places to do this. So we're not opening up Pandora's box, in your professional opinions, to that this is somehow going to have a catastrophic domino effect across all of our coastal areas.
That's correct.
I'm struggling to understand, and as I mentioned, Mr. Uden is a friend of mine. So I'm struggling to understand where there was a divergence. Where did the Marine Industries Association not see this as an option for their members, or as a benefit for their members, potentially, if they chose to, versus their opposition today? I can't completely comprehend. If it's not like you're saying that you can go from these were exclusively marine service businesses and now you can do whatever you want. There were a long list of things that someone could have done anyway. Now, one of the things I did here is that you really couldn't do them, that there was other regulations and restrictions in place that although you said you could do it, you genuinely could not do it. Do you feel that that's accurate?
Well, I don't think that everybody is fully understanding how much has changed with the CRAs. One thing we did discuss is that, as you know, you've revised the future land use maps in every one of the CRAs. You've revised the zoning atlases. You've created a brand new set of zoning regulations, and they will open up, we hope, the redevelopment of these communities in ways that have not happened in the past 20 years. And I don't know if Mr. Uden is as fully aware of all of that as you are.
Thank you. I'm done. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, I think, Ed, in my conversation with John, I talked to John and some others yesterday too at great length about all this. And John, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, speaking for you, but I would share with you, I think maybe the underlying concern of a lot of this is that it's not maybe so much about the CRA, it's everything outside of the CRA, that the concern would be that if we do this, then all of the other commercial waterfront properties outside of the CRA would go in that direction. And I said to John, I have absolutely zero inclination, desire, want, anything that you want to call it, to move past this to where we are with this program for the CRA. I also understand, in talking to John and others, that a lot of our bigger marinas have recently transferred ownership. That also sends some alarming concerns to the marine industries, and should to all of us, that is signaling that there's a lot of money moving around, and there's a lot of money moving around on acquisitions, that maybe somebody believes somewhere that there is the hope that something different will happen with those acquisitions than exist today. I can share, again, I speak for myself. I have, and if they're listening, fine. I have zero want or desire to see that occur. I've been around boats my entire life. I've been on the water my entire life. And access is a super important thing to water life. People move to Martin County for a lot of reasons, but one of them is because of our access to the water. We have gone to extraordinary lengths to acquire beachfront, to make sure that we have accessibility to our beaches and it's free. And we have lots of access points. I shared with John yesterday, and certainly in my 20 years of doing this, we have added at least 2, maybe 3 boat ramps, or certainly enhanced boat ramps, where surrounding counties have not. And we have become the capacity, as we all saw during COVID, when everybody wanted to come bring their boat here, because we had access to the water. And so we are a very accessible waterfront county. And we have a long history with boat building and boat accessibility, and nor do I think any of the five of us want to see any of that change. So I think, Commissioner, Canopy, I think that maybe is some underlining concern. I will assure the marine industries and John sitting here that that is not my intent at all. My intent is really to help facilitate and carry out the visions of the community that they had for the redevelopment areas 20 years ago, and there are reasons why things didn't happen. I would say this to Clyde's comment. What we really did, I think, Clyde, is we cleaned up a lot of stuff. I don't know that we changed a lot of things. We kept the codes, we kept the zoning requirements consistent with what people had. We didn't take away. We might have enhanced a little bit some clarity, but my interpretation of what we did for 2 years was clarifying and organizing everything in a chapter where there was one place to go. There weren't all the other chapters to have to pick through. And now to do something, it's a lot clearer and a lot more predictable, if you will, as to what you can achieve if you're working within the CRA. I think that's how I do it versus we changed everything. We didn't really change. We extracted, we consolidated, we simplified, and put it in one place. I think
You're correct. Thank you for the Commissioner.
I feel like to your point, Commissioner Smith, that maybe there's a bigger and separate conversation unrelated to this on we've prioritized and the marine industry as a targeted sector that we value in Martin County, and how do we have a proactive conversation about how we protect that industry and try to attract that industry separate from this conversation. And I think that we need to have some proactive conversation on that. So, whether that means staff comes back with a presentation on, what are some things that we can do to look at these industries and outside and inside the CRA to protect and encourage them. Commissioner Smith.
I would move staff's recommendation, number one, and then I'll follow up with another comment after that.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. We've accepted public comment by Commissioner Smith, seconded by Commissioner Jenkins. And did you have?
After this is over.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Smith, seconded by Commissioner Jenkins. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 4-1 with Commissioner Hurd dissenting and Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, Madam Chair, what I would say about the further discussion, I think we should, I shared with John yesterday too, there's a piece of property that we recently have done some work with zoning-wise and land use-wise that I think at some point we should come back and revisit. We missed an opportunity, I think, really to incentivize, and that's maybe a good word, more marine industries coming to Martin County. And I think that's a part of the conversation we should have, that if it's one of our cornerstone businesses, we've been talking about a marine hauling route for years. That's something that if this other idea were to come to fruition, that maybe we would consolidate a lot of our boat building in an area that has accessibility to water. I think that's an outside conversation to your point. I think that we should probably have at some point. And if it's part of our economic development strategy and plan, I think we should absolutely move forward on some of those concepts. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we're going to move on to public hearing number 2, the second public hearing to consider adoption of an ordinance amending Article 12 Redevelopment Code Land Development Regulations. Good morning. Still morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Dana Little. I'm the Urban Design Director for Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. Thank you for having us. It's been a while. It's good to see all of you again. And Jessica Corder Seymour is with me. As you know, Jessica is a planner with the Regional Planning Council. This is our second reading and hopefully adoption hearing of what we've called the Glitch Bill, affectionately, of the Land Development Code. This is, of course, a companion piece Article 12 to what you just heard for Chapter 18 of the Comprehensive Plan. Second public hearing to consider the adoption of this ordinance amending Article 12, the redevelopment code. Since we presented in March, the 23rd, there has not been very many changes to this presentation, so I'm going to try to move relatively quickly. And there are a couple of pieces, though, that I do want to spend a moment on. Why a glitch bill? Because we learned a lot of things over the 2 years that we developed these 6 codes for the CRAs. And the development of the codes itself was a learning process for all of them. And we were actually getting real-time input from applicants and developers and property owners. And so this was an opportunity to come back and catch a lot of these opportunities for improvements and also some of the errors that we may have made. But then also we've had some substantive conversations like the one that we just had regarding the Marine Services area, and we've been able to get policy direction on that. It's a large document, this revision, this glitch bill. But I wanted to break down the changes just for your memory, because there are some very simple changes: Scrivener's errors, spelling errors, grammar, wordsmithing, etc. There's been a lot of reorganization that I presented on the 23rd, and so there's an awful lot of highlighted language that oftentimes is just being moved from one section to another. And then there are some substantive changes that we're going to go through. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're big or sweeping, but they could be quantitative, it could be new language. In some cases, it's actually brand new districts and uses that we'll discuss. But nevertheless, we wanted to make sure that those didn't get overlooked and that you were adopting something that we hadn't discussed all the major issues. Tracking the changes, this is a strike through underline as well as the highlighted language. So we've also identified that we've included the entire Article 12, which is a large document. So you'll see many pages don't have any highlighting or underline or strike through because there are no changes. But whenever there was a change to a paragraph, that entire paragraph was highlighted and underlined or struck through. So I'd like to go through the substantive changes with you. And feel free, of course, to stop me if there are any questions along the way. I'm following this numerically in terms of the order of the pages in your document. Hopefully I got them right so that we can reference them relatively easily. Page 9, section 12.1.01. This is a new table that's been added, and it shows the future land use categories and the zoning subdistricts and where they are appropriate. We didn't do this intentionally in the beginning because we weren't sure if we didn't know there was going to be a railroad corridor subdistrict in Hobe Sound, for instance. But what this shows is where the appropriate subdistrict, or what are the appropriate land use designations for the subdistricts. And you'll notice, for instance, commercial waterfront, the third column to the right, only waterfront subdistrict goes there. And same thing as industrial. And there's really only overlap in the general and in the mobile home within those land use districts. This is a section, page 11, 12.1.02F, regarding the Marine Service area. This is what you just voted on. So this language will be struck because that does not exist any longer. So we can move quickly through that. When we brought the glitch bill through, there was a desire to bring forward a new subdistrict of microbreweries and craft distilleries. These uses are currently identified in Article 3, Division 3, but they hadn't been landed on the ground yet. And so if you'll recall, when I presented this before, you'll see here under our permitted use table, down at the bottom, there's a new use group, which is the microbreweries and craft distilleries. I'm going to circle back to this towards the end of the presentation just to locate for you precisely where these would be permitted per each of the CRAs. Open space, this is comp plan language that's been copied from Chapter 18. We've discussed this before. In some cases, so that applicants or residents or users of the code don't have to bounce back and forth so much between the comp plan, we've brought some of that really pertinent language forward and put it into land development regulations. And so it's duplicate language, but and we've only done it in a couple cases. But this one in particular, having to do with small site development, being less than 1/2 acre, is very important. We wanted to make sure that that wasn't lost. Same thing is home occupations. Home occupations are very important, so there's a whole section on it here on page 18 and 19. And the language was brought over from the existing LDRs, but modified and tailored specifically for the CRAs. Page 20, this is a discussion of the finished floor elevations. When Division 1 was originally adopted back in September, I think 24th of 2019, this language about finished floor elevations was included. That means at the time when it was adopted, the finished floor of any residential buildings that had residential on the ground floor, had to be raised, the finished floor 24 inches above the finished grade. We're bringing this back to your attention, or for your attention, because when we were going through the glitch bill process at the CRA board, it was pointed out that, well, the standard increment of stairs is only 7 inches. Why is it 24? It should be 21. We thought that was a very good idea. So that's why we're changing it here. We're actually reducing it in its elevation from what was originally adopted almost 2 years ago now.
Can you pause right there, Commissioner Camping?
Thank you. I'm not sure, Mr. Little, if you will circle back. So while you're here talking about finished floor elevations, I believe each of us received a copy of an email that was sent to Paul Schilling, our Director of Growth Management, from Dan Braden. Did you have an opportunity to see this email? He was
Yes,
talking.
I did, and I was going to bring that up.
Perfect. So if you're bringing it up, I just wanted to see if we could discuss it when you're ready. Thank you.
We can discuss it now, Commissioner, if you'd like.
No, I just wanted to make sure if you passed through this onto other things, we didn't have to come all the way back to it. So whenever you have it in your presentation, it's fine with me.
This is where it is.
Fantastic. Thank you. Great minds think alike.
Okay.
Shall we?
Do you want to address the letter in your presentation?
Unfortunately, I don't have the letter in front of me. I believe that Mr. Braden was raising concerns. Actually, Paul, do you have the?
I can paraphrase it if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Okay. There you go.
Thank you. So Mr. Braden's concerns appear to be namely the cost of raising the finished floor. And when we had multiple conversations with, I want to say, architects, a number of builders as well, way back in 2019 when we were bringing this up, because we knew it was going to be an issue. We presented it to the Treasure Coast Builders Association, I think a couple of times. And cost, of course, has always been brought up as an issue. There are a few here he's referring to cost. He's saying that this could add an estimated $10,000 to the cost of building each of the Habitat for Humanity units that he's focused on. And then he's stating the requirement for a disabled person to have to use a ramp. And also he's pointing out that if the reason for raising the finished floor is because of flooding issues, that when you're at an elevation, a higher elevation property, that doesn't really hold water, if you'll pardon the pun. I would, and as we discussed and debated at length a couple years ago, there are a number of reasons for doing this, for raising the finished floor. What we've seen in many places, Golden Gate is an example, where newer homes that have been built slab on grade are raised up on mounds. And so what tends to happen is that the unfortunate older homes on either side get water shedded onto their property. That's one issue. There is a flooding issue in some cases. It's nice to have your finished floor above grade. There's the issue of just general architectural design and the prominence of residential being raised above the ground. There's a privacy issue as well, especially as you get into more compact and more densely located areas like some of our older neighborhoods. When you're walking right by the front windows of someone's house and you're at grade, you can see directly in at the same level. So there's a whole number of issues. Is there an added cost? Yes. We've tried to get to the bottom of that. We've heard everything from, depending upon the size of the house, it could be $1,000 up to $10,000. We met with builders who just build these, that raise their units already as just a matter of practice. So, there's not been great consensus that we've, derived at this. I think our perspective, if I can speak for the team, is that this is a case where design is a very important component of this. And the raised finished floor elevation of residential buildings is consistent with the historic construction of your older neighborhoods. So that's why I think that's why it was adopted. And the only reason why it's being brought up now is because we're actually reducing the requirement. In fact, Jensen Beach, before we even started this whole effort 2.5 years ago, required 30 inches. And that was the regulation at the time. And so we've moved towards what we think is a more manageable requirement. But that's how I would address Mr. Braden's comments. Thank you.
Maybe you did already, but the ramp, is there a requirement that a single-family residence would require an ADA ramp?
Madam Chairman,
Paul Schilling, Growth Management Director. There is no requirement to build a ramp on a single-family home. As you know, we have commercial development where ADA standards kick in, if you will. So if I'm building a single-family home today, there's no requirement to put a ramp to that house. There is, however, if someone chooses that, then they are free to do that by way of a building permit. So there's no requirement on these structures that Mr. Braden is alluding to with Habitat to put a ramp on those homes.
Okay.
Now, it's been pointed out to me that, and we don't like to fall back on this too often, but there is alternative compliance, and because there's always going to be unique conditions, where maybe for some reason, maybe it's because of the habitat, the nature of the construction, or that they deserve further consideration. So there's always that backstop, if you will, or that release valve, or whatever analogy you want to use, that, if there's a special condition or a unique condition, that an applicant can request that.
I think that's a very legitimate point, that this is not a one-size-fits-all approach, and although you're trying to create language that is consistent for everyone, if you do have a very specific set of circumstances, there is always the ability to have that alternative compliance. I think that's an excellent point that you bring up, and I think that addresses, because we all want to support affordable housing, and if there is a reason that's legitimate that would make a house $10,000 more expensive, you can knock yourself out of the affordable housing, pricing structure. But in those specific cases, they can go to their NACs and look for that relief, and I think that's an excellent point. Thank you.
Shall I continue?
Yes, please.
On page 2021, building transitions, this is revised language to clarify the intent. We changed the separation of 30 feet to 20 feet. That has to, because that would accommodate the building transition from one side of an alleyway to another. If it was 30 feet, it might not allow for alleyways to provide that transition. And in this case, the building transition requirements have been exempted from the core subdistrict. So what does that mean? The building transitions apply to, say you have an existing single-family home and then a new project is coming in. There are some separation requirements that are in place so that you don't have a larger building looming on an existing single-family home. However, in the core subdistrict, and we used forgive me, Commissioner Smith, but across from 11 Maple Street in Jensen, there's that little artist series of buildings. That's an example of where in the core, we felt that requiring these massing separations, you might lose some of that specialness and some of that intimacy that's actually provided in those micro-urban areas. We've talked about Key West a lot as an example, where every inch of land is used for something. And so that's why we relieved this, we exempted the building transition requirement within the core only, but it still applies to the other subdistricts. Convenience stores with fuel and drive-throughs. There's language and exhibits that we developed over time and finessed a little bit from one CRA to the next. But when we got to the end, we realized that the final language and exhibits apply to all of the CRA. So this is one of the big lifts where we took all of this information and these exhibits that you can see here on the screen and moved them into Division 1. They still apply to all of the CRAs, but rather than duplicating them 6 times, it streamlines the document a little bit. So that's what...
Sorry, go ahead. Mr. Little, Commissioner Smith has a question.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. Dana, have you had a chance at all with what the legislature just did with gas stations and limiting our ability to govern gas stations? Or is that just something we're going to have to come back with and deal with when we see what that really looks like?
We're going to have to... I don't know about that. We've been following other bits of legislation, but I don't know about the gas station.
There's some, I think, at least as I understand it, there's some really far-reaching preemption that has occurred this session. I don't know.
Commissioner, that would be something that we would bring back to discuss that.
Thanks.
I hadn't heard of that one. Well, we were adopted first.
Yeah.
Page 23, section 12.104, environmental standards and transportation concurrency exemption area. This language was lifted and added from the comp plan, so it occurs in both places, but I need to point out that the shoreline protection zone, in this version of the LDRs, there's much more language. All of the sub-chapters are there. You see A, B, C, D, and I continue on to the next page, E. So these are a lot of the LDR policies that Irene was pointing out earlier relative to the shoreline protection zone. And again, this is meant to be duplicated as from what's in the comprehensive plan.
As well as the access to the public waterfront language that Irene
Right.
discussed. That's placed in this one.
And that's this one here, the next slide. This is new language that, of course, has been brought in because this has been developed since the March 23rd presentation. So as Irene pointed out, remember she mentioned that we're going to talk for a moment about the LDRs, just to give you some confidence that there are very specific regulatory language that accompanies the public access to the waterfront section. Garage and driveways, page 59 and 60, there was just additional language added for clarity. This is actually some of it from meeting with some builders and, you know, what's the standard garage width and, you know, how do we regulate those. Landscape standards, this was brought up earlier. Interestingly enough, the dumpster enclosures, that there's a deadline, a requirement for coming into compliance. Now, admittedly, and I take credit for this, we overreached, I think, a little bit in the beginning when we came up with this dumpster enclosure because we were requiring a masonry enclosure, whereas in the county now you're allowed to use just regular fencing. And after a long discussion at the CRA board, we recognized that that would be an onerous requirement to have to come in and build footers and masonry walls, etc. Even though that would be a preferred method, especially with some of the smaller businesses, it's just not feasible. And we did hear numbers of like $10,000 to do a masonry dumpster enclosure. It seems, in hindsight, it seems ridiculous to spend $10,000 on your dumpster. However, the enclosures, it's not simply an aesthetic or visibility issue. It's access to the dumpsters from, say, meddling kids, or it's a health and safety issue so that animals aren't getting in and pulling refuse all over the place. So the gentleman mentioned earlier today, or earlier this morning, about the visibility issue. That is part of it, but there are other aspects to it as well. And just so you know, regular fencing from one of your large hardware stores is acceptable. It's not... We're not requiring it that it be masonry. However, you'll recall that I think the letters went out because it was effective, the deadline was effective at our first reading or at the second reading here? Not till after this one, but the letters have gone out, yes.
Commissioner Smith.
So I'm sure that all five of us heard that loud and clear this morning and probably might want to revisit what we think about all that. I just think that probably needs to have some further discussion at some point. I hear Gary, I mean, and I hear your ideas about why we would have it. But I also think of a complex like Gary's over in Ryle that, that's an enormous nut to pull off just because we think it's a better health and safety reason to do so. Maybe there's a grandfathering clause, maybe there's something we think about at some point.
Conversely, Commissioner Paul Schilling, Growth Management Director, we also field from time to time varying complaints about dumpsters and them being unsightly, especially when located within areas that that residents have to traverse. So, if you can imagine a commercial establishment on a arterial, and then a subdivision behind that, and those residents, maybe there's 100, maybe there's 200, maybe there's 50, having to drive by that every day, and it's just unsightly. So I think that's kind of a balance, but we hear you.
And I probably think all of us could use examples as to what we think about that. I mean, I can go to the further extreme where people don't take care of their dumpster enclosure and it looks worse than the dumpster looks. I mean, so it's like, I just got to think it a little bit more. I mean, I understand exactly what you're saying, but there's the other extreme too, where sometimes I think of one of our own enclosures that Martin County has, and it's nasty, and it's in a park, as public as you get. And we have not gone out and built a beautiful new one because we're embarrassed because it's so hideous looking. So just maybe some further conversation someday about it.
Commissioner Campy.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Mr. Little, with the concept that it does not have to be a masonry, fancy, expensive thing. I think if we were going to debate the value of an enclosure versus the value of an expensive enclosure, this morning I agreed with what the gentleman said. That sounded financially prohibitive, especially if you have a site where you have multiple dumpsters. But the concept that the dumpster can just be out and about, I have issues in Palm City where residents down a side street had an issue with a business owner that has the dumpster on his property, but it's right out there in the open. We had an issue on the street that I work on, 34th Street, where I guess it was too difficult for the business owner to pull the 5-yard dumpster in and out, 2.5-yard dumpster in and out. So he just left it on the street. And everyone was furious. And so I think at least in my opinion, to the gentleman's concerns this morning, a reasonable fencing structure should address his major concerns. He was more concerned, rightfully so, that it was $10,000 to $15,000 or $20,000 per enclosure, multiplied by how many he needed to have. A reasonable fence to hide a dumpster, I think, is not onerous.
Okay, Mr. Little, go ahead.
Continuing on with wall and fence standards, page 65. We had, this is another one of the sort of building standards or retail standard discussions that we had regarding walls and fences. We had carried over fences in the front yards being a maximum of 42 inches, but the increment that's sold at the big box hardware stores are 48 inches. So the intent was never for everybody to have cut 6 inches off their fence. So we revised this to be 48 inches. And also we removed item D there because it was redundant with some of the building transition section that we had already gone over. This is new language to this glitch bill. I think it's a dipping of our toe in the pool of urban redevelopment in your CRA areas. We had heard some stories along the way, particularly in Hobe Sound, about some construction techniques. And when you're doing very urban conditions where you're building buildings on the property line, when you think through, you're going to need access onto your property, your neighbor's property. On some of these smaller sites, where do you stage? Where do you put your dumpsters? So we started this section just to discuss some of the submittal requirements that would be enhanced for the core, general, and corridor subdistricts. So that now someone who's applying in one of those potentially urban areas needs to show what their neighbors on either side looks like, the proximity of a building, say, to the property line. That was one of the issues that was in Hobe Sound, that the project that was being proposed, it was on the property line, but the roof was designed such a way that it was actually encroaching into the neighbor's property and would be shedding water on the existing building. So we think it's, and we were careful. We had a lot more language, but we in discussing it as a team, we wanted to be sure not to be too onerous to the applicants. But this is giving staff more information so that we can catch some of those things early on, as opposed to when they become real issues when construction has commenced. So that's what that language is about. Microbreweries and craft distilleries. This is, as I said, a new use group that's been added to the table of use groups, and it's language that already exists in Article 3, I think I said, and we wanted to identify. We understood from staff that this is a desired use in many of the CRAs, but we wanted to locate where they could go, and give it make sure that it was a thoughtful recommendation. So in Jensen Beach, the microbreweries and craft distilleries use would be permitted in the core and waterfront sub-districts. That's the blue and the orange. Excuse me, the blue and the red. Forgive me. General is the orange. And that kind of makes sense in the little downtown or along the water's edge. In Rio, the thought was that microbreweries and craft distilleries would be permitted in the core, the waterfront, the corridor, and the industrial subdistricts. That's something that we're seeing, especially further south in Palm Beach County. Lots of microbreweries or microdistilleries go into industrial districts. They tend to live happily there. So in Rio, what you see is the core, of course, is the red, and then corridor is orange, where you've got some of the commercial uses over here near the bowling alley, etc. The waterfront, and then the industrial district over here in the yellow. In Old Palm City, they'd be limited to the core and industrial subdistricts, so it's the red along Map Road here, and then the industrial district out here on Martin Highway. In Hobe Sound, it would be the core, the corridor, and the railroad corridor subdistrict. Remember, we created the railroad corridor subdistrict in Hobe Sound because there is this very unique condition here, where you've got some light industry and residential type uses right along the railroad tracks, and we thought this would be an appropriate location for those type of uses, as well as the core and red, and then the corridor. Remember, Hobe Sound is unique in that it's the only CRA with US 1 frontage.
So not in general.
Excuse me?
Not in general.
No, not in Hobe Sound. That's not the recommendation.
The TVs are broken.
That's kind of weird. Okay.
So the salmon core is not allowed?
The salmon corridor is where it would be allowed, and
Core.
just to
Orange.
right the bright orange. So there's the salmon, and then there's the bright orange. The bright orange is general. That's more neighborhood oriented development pattern there, and then the corridor. And what I would also add is that we took the standards for specific uses, which is where the microbreweries and distilleries are described today. There are existing zoning designations, including light commercial, general commercial, and I think there's another one, a couple of other ones, including the waterfront, where they've already been identified as appropriate places for the distilleries and micro distilleries. So we went back and looked at the historic maps of the zoning designations in the CRAs and where those zoning categories occurred, and that is why along US 1 you would see pockets where it was allowed in corridor but not in general, tracking back to those previous zoning categories.
That's kind of unfortunate because the property owner south of me, which is in general, actually was talking about it, and I said, yeah, that's right. Yeah, why not? That sounds great. So maybe that area is not exactly okay.
I heard he closed on the property today.
Yes.
Excuse me.
So, Dana.
Yes.
To that point, is there a way we can craft language that someone can apply if they're in general, and can it be a one-off discussion if approved by the CRA? That someone would have to come at least to the board for approval versus by right, you'd have it in core and corridor?
You hear that noise? That's the wheels falling off.
No, those are the wheels of progress. turning.
Well, with all these things, there's opportunities for alternative compliance, right?
Well, well, what I was going to suggest, if I can, forgive me, Christy, if I may, play attorney for a moment. The point that Jessica made is very important, that we wanted to, like we have through everything else use-wise, we've linked it to what was previously allowed or permitted or foreseen.
That was all limited commercial, which was allowed.
So, however, I think that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you could change that and make it an added use. It's taking it away would be the challenge, but I think.
So, do you mind?
I got the thumbs up from Krista. If the board decided to add this as a permitted use in general.
So, a question. In general, in the rest of the codes, can you have a restaurant bar in the other general areas?
Yes.
So I guess I would argue, or I would say, if you can have a bar or a restaurant, that a microbrewery or distillery doesn't necessarily take away, or I don't think it compounds. I'm thinking of the one in St. Augustine. There's a restaurant and distillery and brewery in the old ice house up there, which looks like it was an industrial neighborhood at one time, but now it's a restaurant, brewery, and distillery all in one site. Isn't it really more or less just like an enhanced use that a restaurant would have? I'm thinking years ago we had Hops down on US 1. There was a restaurant brew pub.
Okay, let's try to get us
Back on
track here. I feel like the wheels are coming off here, and we're trying to craft on the fly. So why don't, while they're looking that, you continue with your presentation?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Paul Schilling, Growth Management Director. To answer Commissioner Smith's question and the ensuing conversation regarding uses within those districts, and I'm just paraphrasing, but the Growth Management Director may approve uses other than those listed in those areas through an alternative compliance component, so it would not require board action. So, in other words, if there was a use that would deemed finding that the use is functionally similar to the permitted uses and that the use is not likely to generate harmful impacts or create incompatibilities with other uses in the areas.
Great.
So site by site area.
Great, because what it looks like, what we're doing, not looks like, it is what we're doing. You were taking, Jessica, the old designations and moving that forward into the new code, right?
Yes.
But it kind of looks like that's what we were solidifying, and that was the only alternative. But if you have that alternative and you can come to growth management and alternative compliance for that, and even though it's really like a zoning issue, but it's not, that's great.
And so, Paul, in addition to that zoning, for instance, the fences around the dumpsters of a property that's wholly, a warehouse or something, that also is eligible for some alternative compliance that would be.
Yes, that's correct. There are a broad variety of items within the CRA code that qualify for actions of alternative compliance. We process them frequently.
Okay, Mr. Little, now try to land this plane.
Okay. Port Salerno, we're recommending that they be allowed in core, waterfront, and industrial subdistricts. And in Golden Gate, finally, the core, the corridor, and the industrial subdistricts. Page 184, and the Hope Sound Street Regulating Plan, we included some additional streets within that plan as streets an additional primary street, which is Southeast Porter Boulevard, as well as some additional secondary streets, which is Southeast Rural Way, Pet Way, Southeast Washington Avenue and Southeast Church Street. That raises these roadways and level of attention for potential future complete street improvements, et cetera, for the CRA. These typically, like I said earlier, Hope Sound is unique and then has Dixie and US 1 frontage, and those streets connect those two, so we think that over time those are important connections. And then finally, I think this is the plane circling for a landing. There's a number of items in Article 3 in the existing zoning, existing LDRs. There's 7 divisions, general provisions, standard zoning districts, etc. And we wanted to create a table that shows the consistency of our new zoning districts with the existing LDRs. So it's a quick reference for staff for the Article 3 divisions and sections. And it's particularly important for the specific use standards, and I'll show you that in just a second. And it clearly identifies when Article 3 provisions either apply, they do not apply, or when they have been modified or replaced in this new code. So this is a big table, but you can see Division 1 on the upper left-hand side. So 3.1 applicability, it applies on the far right-hand side throughout the new CRA codes, but 3.1C does not apply. So consistently it goes through every single section and division in the existing Article 3 and identifies where staff needs to look for, identifies where it applies or where it does not apply. I think it's the simplest way to put that. But we think that this is going to be very helpful for staff review of projects because there are still some tentacles, connecting us back to the big code. And so finally, here we are today, May 11th. That completes my presentation, except for the recommendation that move that the board adopt the ordinance amending Article 12, Divisions 1 through 7 of the Redevelopment Code, LDR, and authorize staff to correct any grammatical or Scrivener's errors that may have been identified. Thank you very much.
Move approval.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Smith, seconded by Commissioner Jenkins. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Opposed. Motion carries 4-1 with Commissioner Hurd dissenting. Thank you.
Very much.
Okay.
Job well done.
Yes. Moving on to departmental number 1, Office of Management and Budget. Items which require approval. Ms. Manning. Ms. Krista.
Here earlier, she escaped us.
We lost her.
That's all right.
You like this? It's like the old days.
That's right, just like the old days. So this item, Commissioner, has a
Ms.
few-
Krista, we're going to take a 5-minute break.
Oh, sure.
And
Okay.
You're on.
Okay. Welcome back to our May 11th Board of County Commissioner meeting. We're going to resume with departmental number 1, Office of Management and Budget items, which need approval. Jennifer Manning.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jennifer Manning, OMB Director. You can't, is it on?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, Jennifer Manning, OMB Director. We have 8 items on the agenda. Most of it is a permission to apply. The first one is permission to apply for the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. And this is for the community centers with hopes of replacing the 3 community centers with impact windows, Cassidy Center, Hope Sound, and Community Center in New Monrovia. They're hoping to get $58,242, and the matching dollars are programmed in the 2023 budget FARB, which is a fixed asset replacement FARB.
Miss Manning, do you know which building, the New Monrovia Port Salerno?
No, not of, no. I don't know if there's
Anybody?
anyone that can answer that.
Because they're not the same building. Just curious.
This is from this Public Works and Parks and Recreation, so it's a coordination.
Okay. Get back with me later.
Okay.
The next item is also permission to apply for the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. This is for the St. Lucie Settlement Home Elevation Project. They're hoping to elevate 8 properties to prevent it from future water intrusion. The total project cost is $1.5 million. It's a 75-25 match. So 1.1 would be for grant funds and 377 for local match, which is budgeted which will be paid for, the 25% would be paid for from private funding. So it would be a contribution from private source. Third item is permission to apply for the Hazard Mitigation Grant for the Southeast Merit Way Elevation Project. And this is, it's similar to the one previously spoke about. It's $1.6 million for total costs. 1.2 would represent the grant funding, and 25% would be the county match, which would be programmed in the 2023 capital improvement stormwater projects.
And can you tell me where this is, the length of the project, how many businesses are impacted, how many residences are impacted?
This is located South County in the Jupiter, Tequesta area. There's approximately 8 to 10 homes. Is it? Is it 21? 21 homes. This roadway is subject to frequent flooding during normal fall king tides, and it is a program CIP project. So, but there is no businesses. It's all residential.
Okay.
Fourth item.
George, can you state your name for the record, please?
Oh, I apologize. George Zama, Public Works Deputy Director.
Okay, the fourth item is permission to apply for the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program again. This is for the Southwest Mockingbird Lane drainage outflow.
Jennifer, just pull that a little bit closer to you.
Closer? Sorry. Okay, do you want me to repeat it? Okay.
No.
Okay. No. All right. So it's for the drainage outfall and roadway modification, and the total cost is estimated at $2.7 million, $2.8 million roughly. $2 million is for the grant, and $700,000 for the matching funds, which is programmed in the capital project stormwater program for 2023.
And same questions as in number 3?
Yes, this applies. It's the same type of project. Low roadway conditions, subject to frequent flooding during the normal fall king tides. This area is located in Palm City, along Map Road, north of Martin Downs.
And how many residences, how many businesses does this impact?
No businesses. It's all residential. The amount of homes. How much would you say? About a dozen.
Okay.
More than a dozen.
It's.
Thank you.
Okay, the fifth item is permission to apply for another hazard mitigation grant program for metal roof replacements for 2 park facilities. One is Hope Sound Community Center, and the other one is Eastridge Park bathrooms. And the total cost is $56,872. $42,654 would be representative of the grant funding, and $14,218 for county match, which is also budgeted in the 2023 FARB. Sixth item is permission to accept the E911 automated abandoned callback funding in the amount of $22,698. This will help to effectively process emergency calls. Item number 7 is a request for a budget transfer from the Annie Myers Trust Fund, which was we've had those funds for 38 years. Currently, the balance is $429,000. They would like to use that funding to renovate the Log Cabin Senior Center in Jensen, and they're requesting $200,000 from those funding. Questions? Okay, the final item is requests this is from Information Technology. They're requesting additional radios to replace the radios because they've been depleted due to additional staff, and we usually have a certain amount of radios on hand. And over the years, since we've replaced the radios, we've utilized most of them, and they would like to replace them. The funding source that we're requesting from reserves would be from the general fund, mainly for the sheriff and for fire rescue. They're the major users of those radios. And that is the final item on my agenda.
Okay, let's back to the board. Commissioner Smith.
There's no comment. Move public. Move approval. Sorry.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Smith, seconded by Commissioner Jenkins. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we have our final item of the day is departmental number 3, landscape gateways. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So Kylie Anchula, Field Operations Administrator. And I have with me Carly Batts, and I know that you've all met her, but I did want to just formally introduce her to you. So she is our Florida Nursery Growers and Landscape Association professional horticulturist. She assists Public Works, General Services, and Parks and Recreation primarily. She graduated from Stetson University, where she majored in environmental sciences, and at Stetson she conducted research into the impact of natural areas on human behavior, and her research is ultimately where she gained an appreciation for plant systems and her interest in landscaping. So she is going to present an agenda item on our landscape gateways for you once I pull it up.
And she's working on her arborist certificate.
Put you out of business, Harold.
So on December 17, 2019, the board directed the Public Works staff to define and prioritize gateways within our community. By definition, the goal of a gateway is to welcome an individual into a community and give them a sense of arrival and a positive image. After careful review, staff identified 28 gateway points as characterized by CRAs, historic neighborhoods, and arterial roads. It is important to note that we only maintain 22 of these gateway points. Staff enacted a grading system that broke down each asset by presence or absence of irrigation, health of the plant palette, and physical coverage. Gateways that received an A designation in blue have irrigation, a premium plant palette, and are located on both the median and the right-of-way. A B has irrigation, but an aged plant palette, and only located on the median or the right-of-way. And lastly, the C designation has no irrigation or no landscape assets or both. In total, we have 4 A's, 15 Bs, and 3 Cs. So the maintenance for these landscape gateways are provided by contractual services. Specifically, this contract was modified in 2020 to allow for changes in level of service depending on the area's needs. A majority of our gateway assets are evaluated as a B, and that is due to lack of irrigation, such as the north sign on the left, or aged plant material, or the need for more extensive planting, as seen in the middle and right image. So to compare our gateway assets, we can look at Veterans Memorial Bridge, which was evaluated as an A. It has extensive new plantings on the median and the right-of-way, as well as full irrigation capabilities. So the center is a B for the Port Salerno traffic circle, and it could be considered an A. It has some really nice plant material, such as those royals that you're seeing, but the looks here are a bit deceiving in that a majority of this plant material has been hit by vehicles, and no insurance money is able to be collected for these, so we do need a plan for funding replacement. And then lastly, our C here is Welcome to Hope Sound on US 1 near Jonathan Dickinson.
I know a guy that lives down there. He's in the landscaping business. He might want to throw a couple bushes around.
And it has no irrigation and minimal plantings.
So the coolest thing, Carly, that you've already figured out is you don't respond to that. That's great. Let's just keep on going.
The important takeaway is that Palm City is an A.
Okay.
All right, kids.
I'm out there weeding every day.
Go ahead, Carly.
Okay, so this is a typical plant palette that you would see out in our medians or right-of-ways. It is very consistent, but it is generally aged. So roadway landscaping is known to be stressed by many different factors, including the heat stress, fumes from vehicles, and limited root space from where they are planted. And so ultimately, they could benefit from a plant bed replacement program, and that could potentially reflect the feel that each commission district would like to see in their areas. So current limitations that are impacting our ability to provide a certain level of service fall into 3 categories, and that would be litter, mowing, and irrigation. Litter being the worst. Last year we collected close to 10,000 pounds off of our landscape roadways, and we do receive a high level of requests for service for this issue as well as the next, which during the rainy season would be for mowing, as vegetation does increase in growth during those times. And then when it's not raining, we deal with drought stress, and so that's exemplary in this third photo, where we do not have irrigation in a lot of our different gateway areas. So ultimately, staff recommends an increase in maintenance cycles. This would be concurrent with typical landscape programs seen in HOAs and POAs, and this would allow us to achieve that desired level of aesthetic, and it would result in a yearly cost increase of $46,529. Additionally, staff suggests improving irrigation within our gateways over the next 5 years for an increased cost of $28,200 per year, as well as funding a plant bed replacement program with an associated cost of $26,812, and that would be in perpetuity to continue changing out these plants as they age. Lastly, staff would like to update the existing handbook for streetscapes from 1996 to reflect today's landscape requirements within our community. Questions or comments?
Yes, Commissioner Smith.
So great stuff, both of you. I'd like to see us go a little bit further, and we talked about some of this when we all met. I think the ABC thing is great. That's sort of a nice analysis tool. It kind of tells us where we are and maybe where we need to go. What I'd like to do is to see the 96 book updated, that we actually take the specific roads and list them, and have sort of a plan for each of our, whether they're gateway roads or whether they're significant corridors coming into our communities, however you want to define them. You know, A1A, US 1 and Hobe Sound is going to be different than Bridge Road coming in, but they're still gateway roads. But they might be treated differently. You may have a different vision for what you want to see US 1 look like versus Bridge Road and so on. But I think each of those roads should get a cross section or certainly a sheet in the book that describes a couple things. One, what palette, what you want to see happen to it, right? Whether it does or doesn't have irrigation, that should be highlighted in there so that we know that there's a plan. And then the maintenance schedule that we think is really appropriate for keeping it up, you know, in a way that it's kept up. What I would suggest we do, and we have budget coming up soon, is that we create a CIP sheet, because I think even though you gave us those numbers, I think those numbers in some cases, like for irrigation, are going to be a lot more for the installation, and where we don't have irrigation at all, how do we get irrigation to it? Are there wells involved? Is it tapping into our potable water? Whatever that may be. But that way we could have sort of, whether it's the 5-year plan or a 10-year plan, a 10-year strategy, I'd like to see us break it down into what are the physical improvements, meaning the irrigation, and we talked about this. I don't know if this is the right approach, wrong approach, but let's say there was $50,000 or $100,000 worth of irrigation that had to be done to do all the targeted roads. Maybe what we do in the CIP is that we break it into segments. Like the first year of funding, we do all irrigation, and we fix and fund all the irrigation. We don't get into planning yet. We don't do that. We do that next year. The following year, we come in, and maybe it's the major corridor improvements, and then maybe it's the major tree components. So when we talked about that, you know, I sort of have this thought of like, okay, so let's say we recognize with all of these roads we're going to plant 75 large caliper trees. Maybe that happens over the course of 2 or 3 funding cycles, so that you got the irrigation in place already, so when you go in to put the trees in, it's already there for it, waiting for it. And then maybe the following cycle looks like the ground cover, the ground material, and you come back with the detail. Or you don't do it that way. I still think you do all the irrigation at one time, get all that done so it's in place waiting, because that's the worst part if it's not. The second side of it would be maybe we take 3 roads a year or something and do all the detail work on those 3 roads, go in, mobilize, do all the stuff that has to happen, and do that. I would leave that all up to you guys to figure that out. But in my mind, that's how I see that happening, and that book becomes sort of the supplemental guide to the CIP. So if anybody wanted to really look where we are in the program, you could both look at the CIP, look at the book, and understand what the palette looks like, what the timeline looks like, and then also for us relative to how do we fund this thing if the board agrees. We could map out that funding over a 5-year period of time, because I suspect it's probably more than the numbers that you have there. And that's not your fault, that's probably our fault for what we want to see occur. So anyway, thank you all for doing this.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments?
Excellent job. I appreciate the opportunity we had to discuss this ahead of time. I think that this is an important topic. I agree with what you both said about it gives people a sense of pride in their community. It welcomes people that are visiting. I think it has an economic impact if our site selection folks at the BDB and Economic Council were, you know, presenting Martin County to prospective business owners, or even when we have site selection committees come down from the Florida Athletic Associations for schools. They come to the community, they look beyond just the basic, how many hotel rooms do you have, what are your amenities? They want to feel, we all know communities that are well done, and we all know communities that are not. So I'm appreciative that a lot of what happens in Palm City, you know, all kidding aside, Martin Downs Property Owners Association maintain privately the full stretch of Martin Downs Boulevard, which we all get the benefit of, but they have the Herculean effort of paying for it and doing the work. And Martin Highway is handled by our staff. I think it looks very well done. I get a lot of compliments on it. And Bridge Road is now newly completed. Map Road is right behind it. I think these concepts, are sometimes overlooked, and I appreciate that the two of you and Public Works in general has taken a renewed interest in this, because it is one of those areas that can just sort of be ignored, and it shouldn't be. So thank you. I look forward to working with you.
Okay. Looking for some board direction here.
I would make a motion to accept staff's recommendation for what they've put forward. I agree with Commissioner Smith that it probably is just a starting point, but it is a good starting point.
Okay.
Second that.
Okay.
Can I just add comment to that? Are you supportive of them creating a CIP sheet that will help us map out what this thing's going to cost and track it over time?
No, that's fine.
No, yes, that's
Yes,
fine?
I'm fine. I'm fine with that as a strategy. That's what I had said.
That was a
in
quick
my-
no and then yes.
I was just trying to bust your chops.
Okay, good.
Okay.
You okay with that? Yeah. Okay.
So they'll create, in addition, do you want to add to your motion that they'll create an unfunded CIP sheet?
Yes.
And who seconded? Commissioner Jenkins agrees. Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Campy, seconded by Commissioner Jenkins. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, well, that completes our agenda for today. We are going to take public comment at 12:30. And is there anybody on Zoom? No. Okay. Seeing no one here in the gallery or on Zoom to comment, we will take commissioner comments and Commissioner Jenkins.
Good, thank you.
Commissioner Smith?
Also, thanks.
Commissioner Campy?
I was set, but I do want to just share some positive information about our staff. Yesterday, I got a phone call from the head of the Girls Softball League in Palm City. They play at Lance Corporal Justin Wilson Park. They had a tournament this weekend, and with many different leagues from throughout the area, and they were super pleased with how well kept and maintained the park was, and they wanted me to compliment our Parks and Rec staff, especially the ones that are on the site for striping the fields, and everyone was really very impressed with the condition of the facility. So I wanted to share that. And then I spoke to a resident, a new resident actually, believe it or not, someone I went to high school with, moved to Hobe Sound, and he contacted me to say that, yeah, I didn't know he was moving.
Made the right choice? Is that
Yeah, that's fine. It's fine. I represent the whole county. Anyway, he wanted me to compliment Pete Walden. He had a variance that was necessary. He said he has never met someone so professional and so helpful, and that he was so happy with the process that he had originally planned on buying a commercial building in Palm Beach County. And since the process went so well in Martin County, that he purchased a commercial building in Hobe Sound, where he will have multiple businesses. And then finally, I was touring, I had a meeting, I think all of us did, with the sheriff, and I happened to be over in his offices yesterday, and as we were walking from his office to view a different location in his facility, he was gushing over how pleased he was with Jeff Doherty and the General Services staff for the most recent renovations that they did there, and that the overall upkeep of the facilities. He could not say enough positive things about Jeff and the the General Services staff. So well done for our staff. 3 in 24 hours of people just thrilled with how our team works. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hearn? I'm set. Ms. Krista?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Woods? I'm all set too. So our upcoming meetings will be May 25th, June 8th, and June 22nd. And with that, we are adjourned.